Release that which I by Ermu. Chapter 761, Holy Duel. Weapon shelves were placed on both sides of the platform for the convenience of both dueling parties. Most common weapons were available, including knives, swords, and whips. For the sake of fairness, neither party was allowed to bring their own weapons. After all, a large clan would definitely be capable of forging superior blades, while a poorer challenger would have to rely on their crude equipment. This disparity would cause the duel to lose its meaning. However, Thuram knew full well that there were ways around the rules. As a matter of fact, Iron Whip had defeated Osha previously by covertly swapping the provided whips for Blackwater versions. Although the Arbiter punished the weapons supervisor later on, the result had already been finalized, and no one would contest a large clan on behalf of a fallen clan. However, it was completely unexpected that Osha would rise from the verge of death. Even the strongest of clans now felt pressured by its ferocious might. This was the first time Thuram had seen the chief of Wildflame look on at the new challenger with a solemn look in his eyes. "Is every warrior limited to one weapon?" Ashes suddenly asked. There's no such rule." Thuram regained his attention. "You're allowed to carry as many as you wish." "Great, I'm ready." She attached 2 scimitars around her waist, weighed a large sledgehammer in her hands, and further took up a wooden shield. "These should be enough to last me until the end." Thuram gulped in amazement. Although he long knew that this black-haired and golden-eyed divine lady was extremely powerful, it now seemed like he had underestimated her. Most people required many years of training to use the double-handed sledgehammer, yet she was able to wield it with a single hand and with the ease of a small rapier. She would certainly be a nightmare opponent for any enemy. Clearly, she did not exert her full strength during the conflict in the tavern, or the entire place would have been demolished. "I'm ready too." Andrea casually chose a short bow and deliberately reduced the number of arrows in the quiver to just 22. "Get on the platform," Iron Axe muttered. "Wait." Thuram froze in surprise. "Just 4 of you?" He took a glance at the Grey Castle warriors behind him. The 50-strong contingent was scattered around the place with their backs against the weapon shelves. They peered vigilantly at the onlooking crowd, with no intention of choosing weapons. "There's no rule on the number of participants either, right?" Ashes coolly replied. 4's enough. According to the rules, the number of participating warriors from each side should be between 15 to 30 people. The upper limit was set out of consideration of the space on the platform. However, there was also a stipulation that the number of participants from the challenger clan should not exceed that of the challenged clan. That meant that if the opponent sent out 15 warriors, Osha would be allowed to send out no more than 15 warriors too. This stipulation was born out of a harsh truth: no matter which side won or lost, heavy casualties were expected, and it was common for more than half of the participants to be either critically or fatally wounded. There had certainly been duels in which only one warrior was left standing. Thus, the greater the number of participants, the heavier the losses of each participating clan would be. It was uncommon for one side to send out 30 or more warriors, unless the challenged clan knew beforehand that the challenger clan would not be able to send out an equivalent number of warriors, and might hence use this method to obtain a numerical advantage. Cutbone's decision to send out 22 men certainly took into account that even if they lost the duel, there would not be too much impact on their clan's strength. It would not be the end of the world if they lost control of Iron Sand City to the challenger. As long as they still had brave warriors in their ranks, they would have the chance to mount a comeback in the future. For Osha, the right thing to do would be to send out an equivalent number of participants. Although the Grey Castle warriors looked short and frail, and did not seem brave enough for a battle like this, Osha would still have a huge advantage with Ashes around. Her innate strength, while unaffected by God's stones of retaliation, would be sufficient to determine the duel's outcome. But the scenario would be completely different with just 4 people. The divine ladies were certainly adept at leading and helping people to survive in the harsh conditions of the desert, and were rightly revered for that, but that did not mean they were equally suitable for combat. Furthermore, the opponents were more than likely to equip God's stones of retaliation, which would easily suppress the divine ladies' abilities, such that they might even become weaker than regular people. If Drow Silvermoon and Andrea lost their combat abilities, only Iron Axe and Ashes would be left to fight. No matter how strong the latter was, it would be impossible for her to handle being surrounded by 20 or so opponents who were each willing to sacrifice their lives in order to secure the victory. With only 2 hands and 2 legs, she would certainly not be able to parry every blow. Thuram had thought all these would be common knowledge to Iron Axe since he had participated in holy duels before. Having not been asked to attend the strategy discussion, Thuram did not pay much attention to their decisions, in line with the principle that he who asks less lives longer. Yet, he never expected the latter to be this negligent. He stood aghast as the 4 of them walked onto the platform nonchalantly. He shuddered involuntarily and cold sweat began to pour from his forehead. Yet, at the same time, he felt like he was standing naked in a frosty desert, as though the fire trees surrounding the place were no longer able to shelter him from the cruel winds. He should know that he's a member of the Osha clan. If he fails, would I still have a place in the small oasis? I'll probably not even be able to remain in southernmost region. If I'd known, I would have thrown all the clan's people to him. Then he won't dare to take this sort of risk. The appearance of the 4 people on the platform shook the crowd greatly too. Although sending on fewer participants than the opponent was a symbol of confidence and courage, in this case pitching 4 people against 22 battle-hardened tribal warriors was virtually suicide. The hissing noises dissipated at once. The eyes of every onlooker widened, and the apathy on their faces turned into astonishment and dismay. Do you confirm that the Osha party shall consist of just the 4 of you? In view of such a strange sight, the chief of Wildflame felt compelled to inquire. That's right. Ashes grinned slightly. Let's get on with it. By the way, have you guys written your wills? The audience burst into an uproar. Who's this lass? She must be delusional. Surely even divine ladies won't be able to resist the god's stone arrows? Wait, I've a feeling she's serious. I feel the same. She seems to have as much blood on her hands as me. Are you sure? I'm a warrior and know this from experience. My heartbeat also says that she's absolutely frightening. But there are just 4 of them. We'll know the answer shortly. In a matter of minutes, the situation on the sidelines had changed greatly. Everyone's attention was fixed on the platform, and the initial apathy was replaced with a warm excitement. Even if it was a suicide mission, the courage of the Osha party was praiseworthy. And the Irons and people were never reluctant to show respect for those who were truly brave. Upon hearing the rumblings from the audience, Thuram began to hesitate. Are they really confident of victory in spite of the huge numerical disadvantage? As a flurry of confused thoughts ran through his mind, the arbiter rang a gong that was hung at one corner of the platform. Without further ado, I shall announce that the holy duel between the challenging Osha clan and the challenged Cutbone clan begins, now. Chapter 762, Music, Rapid Fire, and Strength. Once the announcement was made, the Cutbone warriors immediately drew their weapons, and without performing the slightest of probes, they encircled the 4 opponents from both flanks. No matter how well thought out Osha's plan was, they were but 4 people. It was impossible for them to control even their own half of the arena. When the 22 warriors completed the encirclement, the Osha party would face attacks from all directions. These warriors lived to duel, and thus had no apprehension toward a life-and-death battle. From the moment they stepped on the platform, they had already dedicated their lives to the 3 gods. This was not only a contention for power, but also a fight to delight the gods. Suddenly, they heard a sad and mellow singing voice. Drow Silvermoon's song swiftly drowned out the blusters from the underground fire and the Styx River. The melody was ethereal and smooth, and sounded as if it came from the distant horizon. Deep feelings of loss, suffering and grief were embedded in the song, such that anyone who heard it could not help bursting into tears. This made the Cutbone warriors pause their footsteps. No, stop that. What are you doing? Stop it. You're blaspheming this holy place. Heretic. I'll kill you. The onlookers' expressions changed dramatically. Some pointed at the cut-bone clan and berated them, while others hid their faces and cried as if they had encountered a sorrowful incident. Thuram could not believe what he was about to see. The cut-bone warriors turned with murderous intent towards their own clanspeople. In a flash, the audience stand was covered in fresh and boiling blood as the warriors slashed at the abdomens of their kin. Heads rolled one after another onto the platform, permanently seized in an expression of consternation and disbelief. The accompanying sorrowful melody seemed to record and narrate this horrifying massacre. It lasted only for a brief moment. When he blinked his eyes again, the scene he had just witnessed disappeared without a trace. The 22 warriors were still lurching forward, albeit with much slower footsteps than before. Their sluggishness could not be helped. Their clanspeople were supposed to be their greatest source of strength, support and spiritual sustenance. They lived and died for their clan and its quest for power, while their people cheered them on as heroes. Unfortunately, it was all messed up now. The cries and curses of their clanspeople made them feel highly uncertain of what had just happened, while even the other clans which supported them now glowered at the warriors as if they had done something unforgivable. Warriors are never fazed no matter how powerful an enemy is, but they can't disregard rebukes from their own people. Could this be the Osha princess ability? But, how? Although Thuram had seen mind control abilities before, such as that of Kabbalah of Sandstone clan, he had never seen or heard of these abilities being used at a range exceeding 10 footsteps. He touched the god stone of retaliation that he wore on his neck and glanced at his new owner. Drow Silvermoon was visibly standing at a distance far greater than 10 footsteps from the audience stand. Was it really her singing voice which compelled those people who didn't adorn a god stone to cry bitterly? He believed that the cut-bone warriors probably held the same doubt. And in a duel, doubts were fatal. Everything happened in a split second. The instant they slowed their footsteps, Andrea seized the initiative. Without using the short bow she carried on her back, she flung an arrow at each of the 4 nearest enemy duelists. Perhaps because they were affected by what was happening outside the platform, or because they lowered their guard as they saw that the opponent was not holding a bow, they took no responsive action. By the time they saw the arrows flying straight at them, it was too late to evade. The handful of arrows traveled as powerfully as the hardest shots a bow could make. Each arrow penetrated its target slightly below their right clavicle and wedged in their bones. This caused their dominant hands to lose all energy and become unable to wield weapons. The 4 warriors thereby became entirely incapable of battle. This created a gap in the encirclement. The song which reverberated on the platform suddenly changed from sorrowful to passionate and high-pitched. Intense drum-beating sounds seemed to throb on every listener's heart and inspirited them. Ash's figure was like a black shadow, which once again attested to her inexplicable strength. She was visibly carrying a sledgehammer and a shield, yet her footsteps were so light that she seemed to be drifting. Her left hand was used for parrying while her right hand wielded her weapon. Nobody was able to guard against her strikes. Instead of smashing her opponents with powerful blows, she held the sledgehammer horizontally and dashed in all directions around the platform, and this way could subdue 6 or 7 people in no time. The numerically superior cut-bone warriors now found themselves in a dilemma. If they attempted to continue flanking the Osha party from both sides, they would struggle to parry Andrea's arrows, and moreover would have to find a way to get around Ash's and mend the gap. Even if they held up their shields, the arrows, which seemed to have eyes on them, could still puncture their legs. The magic stone arrows which they could fire amidst their panic would barely even threaten the opponent, and when the god stones fell on the floor, Iron Axe, who served a defensive role, would simply step and crush these expensive playthings that were worth dozens of gold royals each. Yet, if they decided to abandon the encirclement, their numerical advantage would become useless. Everyone, close up to me. Perhaps seeing that their initial plan was no longer viable, one of the warriors gave a loud cry for the dozen or so standing men to gather together. At this point of the duel, it was clear to everyone that, despite Ash's cocky proclamation at the start, not a single participant had died. If she truly intended to kill them, none of them would be able to resist her hammer blows. Every warrior was a precious asset of his clan. Thus Ash's method garnered the respect of the onlooking clans, including the duelists of the Cut-Bone clan themselves. While they were not afraid to sacrifice themselves for the purpose of the holy duel, it had to be a meaningful death, instead of simply perishing blindly. Mother Earth was not a bloodthirsty deity. Though she was fond of courage and strength, she would not wish to see needless deaths. The warriors sheathed their weapons and lined up in a row. They each stretched both hands in front of them such that their intentions could not be clearer. Humph. Ashes laughed easily and placed down her shield. Subsequently, she dashed directly towards them while raising up the sledgehammer horizontally. The sledgehammer collided powerfully against the wall of men. Ow! Don't fall back. Hold on. Some shouts were heard from the audience stand, but neither clan's name was mentioned. It was as if at this stage, nobody cared who won or lost as long as they could witness a brave and magnificent contest. Those who were crying only a moment ago now clenched their fists and stared at the center of the platform. For some reason, Thuram did not feel that anything was strange. The drum beats continually grew more intense, as if calling for the audience to move forward courageously. Every listener was now in such a highly excited mood that they felt themselves to be a participant in the duel instead of an onlooker. Ashes stretched her upper body into a long and slanted line and bent her legs, before she engaged in a physical standoff with the Cut-Bone warriors. Her arm muscles formed a perfect arc, such that they were perhaps the best visual depiction of strength with beauty. But of course, this was not a duel between one person and an entire clan. Once Iron Axe, Andrea, and Drow joined in the scrimmage, the stalemate was broken. The four of them slowly pushed their opponents towards the edge of the platform. Every step was greeted with shouts from the audience. Thuram could not resist joining in the clamor and waving of arms. After a period of crescendo, the melody finally reached its climax. The advancing footsteps became synchronized with the drum beats. At this point, the warriors had no energy left. The Osha quartet roared in chorus and pushed their opponents off the platform. The music abruptly stopped as this happened. Yet, the stirring melody continued to reverberate nonstop in everyone's ears, and would not dissipate for a long time. The winner is the Osha clan. Chapter 763, The Female Lycanthrope. As Gwell's burn flame approached the training hall, he could hear a thumping noise from its interior. There seemed to be a rather intense activity going on, as if a heavy and blunt instrument was repeatedly hitting against a sandbag. Chief. The guard at the door lowered his head and bowed. Is that Lorgar practicing inside? Gwells pointed towards the ajar gate. Yes, she came here early in the morning, and said not to disturb her. I'll have a look. But Chief. What? He cast a glance at the guard. Nothing, you may enter. The guard shuddered slightly. Seems like my daughter is becoming more and more dignified. Gwells did not feel the least bit disgruntled by the guard's obstruction and instead raised his eyebrows with interest. The way things were going, the raging Flare clan would have a new successor when he could no longer climb on to the burning stage. He opened the door to a training hall which was assembled from thousands of leather pieces, hemp ropes and wooden poles. In Iron Sand City, only the chief himself, who owned the largest stone castle around, could build an indoor training ground like this. The hall was not paved with dirt or stone, but fine yellow sand instead. Thus, it felt like one was walking in the desert. The sand was fine and small but not soft, and many sharp objects were concealed in it. These were often broken teeth or weapon fragments left behind by the trainers. There was also a considerable amount of blood that seeped through, which therefore caused a portion of the sand to turn dark red. Gwell's grandfather once said that if all of the yellow sand was dyed red, Wildflame would forever occupy the position of the strongest clan and remain peerless in the southernmost region. This was because he had considered that if the clan was ever defeated, they would have to vacate this stone castle, and as a result, the overhead leather tentage, as well as all of the yellow sand, would have to be brought away. Even if they could not rebuild a training hall like this, at least they would not need to dye the sand again when they retook the first position. A row of metal bars was erected on one end of the training hall. His daughter was here barefooted, with her pants and sleeves rolled up. She repeatedly threw heavy punches at the hanging sandbags. Gwels had no doubt that if these punches were thrown on a person's body, the viscera would be split into pieces. Excited after seeing the Osha clan's performance? He smiled at her. Lorgar turned her body and performed an aerial kick at a rebounded sandbag. Her slender legs moved as quick as lightning and sent the sandbag, which was as tall as a person, flying. The hemp rope holding the sandbag was finally overwhelmed, and snapped halfway through the violent swaying. The sandbag spun through the air and fell heavily on the floor, causing the interior sand to spill out. She exhaled loudly, causing her bestialized hands to return to normal. You don't have to tell everyone, Papa. You already know what I'm thinking. You admire that divine lady called Ashes, right? Gwels laughed heartily. After all, in one-to-one combat, it's hard to find you a suitable opponent from this city. Lorgar puckered her mouth. Unfortunately, they've just won the right to enter Iron Sand City, and there's unlikely to be another contest for some time. Even if we issue them a challenge invitation, they'll probably decline. Of course. As the newly promoted clan, they'll have many trifles to sort out in order to gain a foothold in this city. Perhaps there'll be a new challenger during the next spring. Nobody would want to waste their energy at this time. And that's why I can only hang out with these sandbags for now. Lorgar sighed. Did you come to see me just to say this? You would rather hang out with these sandbags than talk to Papa? That's not the case. She shook her ears and lowered them as if to admit her mistake. Ahem, watch your expression. Gwels controlled the urge to stroke his daughter's soft and fluffy ears, and instead issued her a solemn reminder. No matter how cute she looked, it was not befitting of a future clan leader to reveal such an expression. She should remain serious at all times, because this was the only way that her subordinates would revere and obey her. Oh. Lorgar immediately straightened her ears and replied seriously. Gwels gave a nod of satisfaction. Ever since his daughter had awakened as a divine lady, she increasingly enjoyed fighting, while her strength and ability consistently improved. From the Majin's perspective, there was nothing wrong with these. However, as she grew older, the abilities gifted to her by the three gods were beginning to show signs of sequela. At first, Lorgar looked just like a regular person, except that she would transform into a large desert wolf when she used her abilities. After many fights, she mastered the technique of transforming a single limb, and thus had an assured means of controlling the God's Stone of Retaliation. As the effective range of the God's Stone was only 2 to 3 steps, she was able to bestialize her arm by keeping a distance away from the stone. The force which her arm could then exert was too great for any normal person to resist. She thereby became unbeatable in a duel. The clan's warrior contingent, which had suffered a severe loss of personnel through the process of defending the first position and was showing signs of instability, became rejuvenated and stronger than ever before when she joined. Nobody had dared to challenge Wildflame's position for 5 years now. But, after many years of practices and battles, a section of Lorgar's body had permanently become wolf-like, such as her pointy ears and a half-visible tail. These did not revert to normal even when she withdrew her abilities. Therefore, at present, Lorgar was a half-human, half-wolf monster. As could be imagined, she would never be able to live the life of a proper divine lady. No charming warrior would ever be attracted by her body and looks, while Lorgar herself was not fond of those who were too unqualified. Perhaps only her dear father did not mind whether she was a human or a beast. Thus, she set her heart upon becoming the chief of Wildflame. Only by standing in the position which everyone had to look up to could she silence the questions about her. What do you think about the holy duel? It looked exhilarating, but in truth, it was just a trick by Osha's chief, Drow Silvermoon. Aside from Ashes, there was nothing impressive. Lorgar wagged her tail. I must say, this tactic was brilliant indeed. She used her ability to bring the audience into the duel while steering clear of the restrictions, and completely controlled the direction of the duel. Gwels remarked, stroking his beard. Not one person died to determine the outcome of the duel. I'd never seen something like this for many years. I believe that when the Cut Bone clan looks back on what happened, they won't hate Osha for it. This type of trick can only be used once, Lorgar retorted disapprovingly. I'm willing to bet that in upcoming duels, the audience will start to adorn God's Stone of Retaliation as well. Although Osha's methods may have won their opponent's respect, it may backfire one day. You can't fill your stomach with respect. Who knows, maybe their first challenger will be a resurgent Cut Bone clan after a short period of recovery. Gwels patted his daughter's shoulders relievedly. That she was able to notice these things, and place the clan's interest at the top of her considerations, were signs that she had the makings of a chief. Although she was keen on a well-matched and entertaining contest, she would not deliberately look for such opportunities and thereby ignore threats to the clan. Just then, the guard who was keeping watch outside the training hall walked hurriedly up to the duo. After saluting, he reported, "Chief, I've just heard the news that the Osha clan has issued another request for a holy duel." What? Gwels was taken back and his face changed color. It had, after all, only been a day since they gained entrance into Iron Sand City. To who? The fourth-placed Sandstorm clan. Aren't they moving into Iron Sand City from the small oasis? No. I've even heard that they rejected Cut Bone clan's arrangements to move out. Crazy, what are these people thinking? Was it not their intention to move into Iron Sand City? Looks like we were wrong. Lorgar had remained silent for some time before she laughed softly. Perhaps a duel with Ashes isn't as unlikely as I'd imagined. What do you think, Papa? Chapter 764, The Miracle Route. At night, the Skull Cup became the liveliest place in the small oasis. I watched the duel between Osha and Sandstorm with my own eyes. A customer swillied down a jug of fire lantern wine and exclaimed. The black-haired divine lady was simply unstoppable. The instant the gong was rung, she charged straight up to the opposing divine lady and knocked her out with a single blow from her shield. Isn't the divine lady from the Sandstorm clan called Sandra Sandrain? She can use sand to create armor and launch attacks. How did she lose so easily? Another customer questioned. Even if she couldn't respond in time, the sand armor she was wearing should be tougher than the Northerner's armor. How did it not block the attack? You think I'm lying? I wasn't the only one who saw it. The customer bawled disgruntledly. The sand armor may be tough, but I didn't see it work at all. The moment that Osha's divine lady charged up to her, the sand covering her body spattered onto the floor, and her face took a full blow from the shield. Don't you remember that in the first duel, Osha's divine lady stood up to a dozen Cut Bone warriors on her own? With that kind of strength, it's only out of mercy that Sandra isn't dead. Spattered onto the floor. Was she wearing a God's Stone of Retaliation? Maybe, but I'm not sure about that. The Cut Bone and Sandstorm duelists were certainly wearing them, however. Maybe these things don't work on her. A divine lady who isn't affected by God's stones. How's that possible? Will you stop interrupting? Someone whined. Give this man some more liquor and let him finish speaking. Thank you. The customer took a sip of his newly filled jug and continued. Sandstorm clan probably didn't expect their divine lady to fall first, and quickly lost their formation. They had only sent out half of the quota, and Sandra was surely their side's linchpin. Once she fell, there was virtually no chance of victory. Not one person died, again? Indeed. All 15 of them are alive. They were either struck by arrows on their shoulders and knees, or were knocked out by Osha's divine lady. A flurry of whispers was heard amongst the crowd. But this is nothing. The customer suddenly became even more excited, and stood onto the bar counter so that everyone could see him. The duel 2 days ago was the truly unforgettable one. Osha versus Black River, a large clan infamous for its audacity and cruelty. I'm sure everyone has heard its name before. Of the duelists that fought against them, very few managed to survive. Though they don't have a divine lady, they are entirely made up of top class warriors, and always send out a full strength of 30 people. Compared to the other 2 duels, a lot more blood was spilled this round, but the entire tavern quietened down when they heard the word "but." Everyone was eager for the customer to complete his sentence. But, once again, not one person died on the platform. The customer exclaimed. Everyone in the crowd gasped. That's impossible. When I did some trading in Iron Sand City today, everyone was discussing the news of Black River Clan's heavy losses. They even hung a black flag on the stone castle for mourning. And you claim that not one person died? You really need to listen more carefully. The customer twitched his fingers. I said that not one person died on the platform. I can attest to that, someone swiftly chimed in. I was also watching. That's right. Although I wasn't in time for the second holy duel, I was able to make it the day before yesterday. The platform could be said to be flowing with rivers of blood, hence it's extremely impressive that no one died. Another person added. What exactly do you mean? Please elaborate for everyone's sake. Miss, give him another 3 jugs. It's easy to understand. The Divine Lady gave them a chance, but even when their limbs were broken or fractured, they tried using their teeth to bite her. Under this circumstance, she was forced to nullify their counterattacking ability completely. The customer deliberately paused for a moment. She used a long knife to sever their limbs before she kicked them off the platform one by one. If just an arm or a leg was severed, they would have been able to survive after some treatment. But without all 4 limbs, they weren't able to hold on until they reached Iron Sand City. The blood loss alone killed them. Can you really blame OSHA for this? He gulped down a large mouthful of wine and repeated his question. What do y'all think? Speak up. Probably not, they hadn't done so in the previous duels, and were forced to do so this time. That nobody died on the platform is sufficient proof that the Divine Lady had no intention to kill. That's right. In my opinion, Black River deserves it. They didn't even know who their opponent was, and thought that their usual appearance would intimidate OSHA. Well said. Barkeeper, give everyone another jug of fire lantern wine. It's all on me tonight. Someone shouted towards the second floor of the tavern. Thuram, who had all the time been leaning against the window on the second floor, clapped his hands and replied, No need. This round is on me. To OSHA. To OSHA. The first floor of the tavern burst out in cheers. Thuram finished the drink in his hand and let out a long sigh. In the past week, the number of customers to Skull Cup had been rising. The first floor, which had been considered spacious, became overcrowded instead. Everyone was busy discussing only one thing, and that was the holy duels. In fact, it was not only the tavern but also the small oasis which became packed. Wherever he went, he would see moribunds and half-deads from various clans inquiring about news of OSHA. This was something that could never have happened in the past. An upsurge in population was a huge burden for the administrators of the small oasis. The granaries never had enough stock to begin with, and furthermore, it was easy for people who came with bad intentions to blend into the crowds. According to the watchdog's usual practice, the small oasis only allowed in irons and people who were able to bring benefits to the place. They had to be either merchants or warriors who sought refuge. That the clanspeople from all corners of the Silver Stream Oasis were now free to gather here was entirely because of the orders of the new owner, Drow Silvermoon. If he was the Thuram of old, his daily work would simply be intended to earn a few gold royals for the watchdogs, and at the same time set aside some money for himself. The transformation was more than he could ask for. At present, his fate was firmly interlocked with that of the OSHA clan. It was exhausting enough to make sure that his men maintained order in the small oasis. Fortunately, the new owner had already considered his circumstance. After the first duel, Drow allowed him to remain in the small oasis and focus on the domestic situation. To ensure an adequate food supply, Iron Axe not only brought back a batch of food from the Cut Bone clan, but also offered gold royals to 2 other oases. When one of them rejected the deal, they were raided and seized by Grey Castle soldiers the very next day, and their territory was exchanged for food from the food-abundant Silver River clan. In reality, by this point in time, Thuram did not have the faintest idea what the OSHA people's intentions were. They not only accepted the challenge of a clan which had been previously unharmed, but also spared the warriors of Cutbone and Sandstorm clan, allowing them to recover their full strength after a short rest. Even if they desired to be the top clan, doing so seemed completely meaningless. The one thing that comforted Thurum was that the divine ladies brought back by Drow Silvermoon were indeed extremely powerful. The party always consisted of only 4 people, yet they had already beaten 3 large clans in succession. There were, at present, only 2 clans to go. And tonight, there should be news from the Land of Fire once more. The outcome of Osha's challenge against the Wildwave clan. Chapter 765, The Last Battle. At midnight, a messenger came running to the tavern, panting. "We won, we won," he said with a husky voice, without even drinking a drop of water. "Sir, the Osha clan has won." To return from the Land of Fire to the small oasis on foot it required a day, and if one could arrive on the same day if traveling by horse. It was obvious that once the fight was over he had immediately rushed back to the oasis. The whole Skull Cup shook with the news. "Ha, I knew they could win." "What was the course of events? Tell us, how did they win? No casualties as always?" Talking and asking, everyone surrounded the messenger while at the same time the best fruit wine was delivered in front of him. Thurum also felt relieved. After all, the stronger Osha was, the better life he would have as a member of the clan. He did not care much about the fact that it was not him who had led the clan to score such a victory in the fight. As long as he could make his clan members shed the half-dead and dead status, he would always believe that he had made a good bargain with Grey Castle. He clapped towards that clan member. "Take a breath first and then tell us the details of the fight." "Yes." The messenger satisfied his thirst with some fruit wine, took a deep breath and said, "The 2 sides didn't fight as the Wildwave clan reached an agreement with the Osha princess and willingly gave up the second seat." "What?" Everyone in the tavern remained quiet for a while and then suddenly all of them started talking so loud that the roof seemed to shake. "The 2 sides didn't fight? Willingly giving up, does this count as surrender? Doesn't this mean that Osha is 1 step away from becoming the chief clan? Winning a series of 4 holy duels while not killing anyone? This has never happened before. I also heard of this so I came as fast as I could." "Haha, me too. If it wasn't for this, who would want to leave the Silver Stream Oasis during the cold winter? Damn, it was worth coming here. To the 3 gods from Osha. To Lady Drow Silvermoon." Thurum was also stunned for a moment. But not because of Wildwave clan's surrender, this kind of action was understandable. Saving their strength by keeping temporarily the 3rd seat, waiting for Osha and Wildflame to both weaken through their battle and then finding the opportunity to regain 2nd place, or maybe even becoming the chief clan. After all, they could afford to retreat, unlike Wildflame. What surprised him was that he had suddenly come to realize, during all the chatting, what was his new master's purpose. They were quickly gaining popularity. There has never been a holy duel before that attracted as much of Sand People's attention as this one, the vengeful return of the Osha princess, the continuous challenges just like a mighty storm, no matter how many the enemies were, always fighting with 4 people, plus the extraordinary record of not killing anyone. All of these, as unbelievable as they may sound, greatly attracted people's curiosity. Even though the holy duel was an important ritual in deciding each clan's position and power, but for many of the Sand Nation's people, that was very far from them. Some clans, from their establishment until their disappearance, would never leave the Silver Stream Oasis and so naturally would not care about the challengers and the fights between the clans. After all, being able to stand out from a myriad of clans was so rare that the news of a normal alternation of power was not even as attractive as the news of the Osha being framed by the Iron Whip. But it was different this time. A clan member who had been subjected to exile and the daughter of a chief who was sold as a slave still had the opportunity to turn things around. Just by considering this, most of the weak clans had unconsciously taken the side of the Osha. But the things that happened afterward were even more bizarre, and thus in just 1 month, Osha had turned from an unknown challenger into the center of Sand People's discussions. The Full of People Tavern was the best proof. No matter if they were full of expectation or sarcasm, or if they were just curious to see how far could Osha go, at least Drow Silvermoon had now become a household name. It was not hard to imagine that at the time of the last holy duel, numerous people would go to the Land of Fire to personally watch Osha's battle to ascend to the top. Thuram naturally understood the meaning of such a reputation. The last clan chief whose name spread throughout the entire southernmost region had almost unified the whole desert, and even though later he had fallen in the war with Grey Castle, he was widely considered as the three gods' emissary. Did the new master also have this goal in mind? The only difference this time was that the Osha did not need to oppose Grey Castle. The power supporting them was actually the Northern Kingdom, which was suppressing the Sand Nation. His Majesty Roland Wimbledon will bring order and oasis to the Majin clan. Thinking of Iron Axe's words, he suddenly realized that once Osha really became the chief clan, maybe something great would happen. That would probably change the fate of all Irons and people of the Majin clan. 2 days later, outside of the small oasis, at the camp of the First Army. Your injury, is it okay? Echo looked at Ashes worryingly. The battle with the Black River clan had stained her whole body with blood. Even though most of it was her opponent's, she still didn't come out unscathed. Don't worry, it won't affect our plan. Ashes carelessly untied her dark hair, letting it fall on her loose cope. At times like that, it was impossible to see that she was an experienced fighter, but more of a graceful beauty. Leaf herbs are also very effective. The deeper cuts are almost healed. They are only a few exterior injuries. Extraordinary witches are physically better than us. After all of the nutrition goes to the muscles instead of the brain. Andrea shrugged. When she was fighting alone against the church, she was hiding in places that even mice were not willing to stay, surviving on dead animals. If that didn't kill her, then don't even mention these small injuries. Ashes rolled her eyes, but instead of arguing with her like usual, she leaned on the chair and closed her eyes. This is how a veteran should act. Iron Axe next to her thought, apart from eating and fighting, the rest of the time should be used for resting, in order to restore both physical and mental health. The other witches of Neverwinter may also be strong, but not many of them would be able to do that. This is why His Majesty had delayed his plan only to wait for her. What are we going to do next? Echo asked. We have done our best according to His Majesty's instructions. Iron Axe recalled Roland's instructions before their departure. Although some words were very hard to understand, like the making hype being the most important thing, by creating a topic, a legendary duel, so that the whole desert could hear their voice and so on, but in overall, the plan was to draw as much public attention as possible. Nowadays, more and more people were coming to watch the holy duel from various locations of the Silver Stream Oasis, so their plan was successful. All that is left is to defeat Wildflame, and then, at the Holy Land, in the presence of everyone, you tell them what His Majesty has instructed you. I understood. Echo remained silent for a while and then clenched her fist as if motivating herself. Don't worry, Lady Silvermoon, His Majesty didn't require everyone to understand this. You don't need to feel too much pressure. Iron Axe said. You only need to do as usual and let your voice be heard everywhere in the Land of Fire. No matter how many people respond to us, the new order will spread in the whole southernmost region down the Silver Stream. Suddenly, Thuram entered the room. He saluted the four of them and took out a letter. The Wildflame clan responded to Osha's challenge request, but they require specific people to participate in the battle. What do you mean? Andrea frowned. It says in the letter that Princess Lorgar of the Wildflame clan wishes to have a one-on-one fight with Ashes on the burning stage, Thuram replied respectfully. Chapter 766, Ashes against Lorgar. The holy duel between Osha clan and Wildflame clan was about to begin as planned. The Land of Fire had never been as lively as it was today, with the spectators almost surrounding the high platform. In order to ensure that more people enter the Holy Land, Iron Axe also released on loan a box of God's Stone of Retaliation. As long as one clan had no more than 50 people, the rest of the clans would not say anything. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to stop them. Osha nowadays was already the popular second strongest clan. As long as they did not oppose the three gods, anything they required had to be taken into careful consideration. Under the cheerings of the crowd, Ashes slowly walked on the platform. The Irons and people of the Majin clan were full of respect for real fighters, and her performance the past month had earned her everyone's respect. Some were even calling her the strongest fighter in the Northern Kingdom. Thus, this fight was regarded as the battle between the strongest of the Northern Kingdom and the strongest of the southernmost region. Ashes was still dressed like usual, her long hair tied into a ponytail and hanging down her waist. She was wearing a black robe without any armor and not carrying any weapons. But it wasn't because she was arrogant. The Wild Flame clan's request for an unarmed fight meant, according to Thurum, a fight without any weapons, armor, or other supporting items, including god stones of retaliation. Obviously, banning god stones would help Lorgar to some degree, since it would inadvertently weaken the Extraordinary's combat strength. Ashes believed that it was a coincidence, because in the past month, she had found out that they were not aware of the categorization of witches' powers. As long as one had awakened, she was regarded as a divine lady, but they did not know of the most special type of witch, the Extraordinaries. The opponent probably just wanted a good fight. She ultimately agreed to this request, after taking into account that the ability of Princess Lorgar of the Wild Flame clan still belonged to the melee type. This information had not only been confirmed by Thurum's description but also from many other sources. The Divine Lady Lorgar's ability was almost similar to that of Maggie's, as she could turn into a monster while obtaining strength and agility far beyond that of ordinary people. This made her extremely excited. Who would be stronger, a transformed witch or an extraordinary? If it was an opponent like Anna, Ashes would have never accepted. The unpredictable black fire could both defend and attack, so there was no way to fight against it. Without the protection of God's stone, it would almost be impossible to get closer than 10 meters. On the other hand, an equal combat would also be beneficial for her. Since she found out about the Transcendent, Ashes were always thinking of improving her ability. According to Agatha, becoming a Transcendent required everyday practice as well as continuously battling with strong opponents. This way, through life and death situations, one could achieve high evolution. This was the main reason that led her to accept the opponent's request. At that moment, a sudden cheer burst from the crowd as a woman wearing a hooded cloak swiftly jumped on the platform, heading towards Ashes. Being the strongest of them, the Sand People's cheering for her was slightly louder. There was no doubt that she was the opponent she had to face today, the Wild Flame clan's Divine Lady, Lorgar. "You are Ashes." She took off her hood and revealed her red curly hair as well as a pair of tall fluffy ears. Ashes was stunned. "Are these dog ears?" "Wolf ears." Lorgar corrected her and her face instantly became red. "Oh, you aren't wearing shoes? Isn't the ground too hot?" She gazed down at her bare feet. Majins are never afraid of the hot sand. She tiptoed while taking off her cloak, exposing also a fluffy tail behind her. Judging by her expression, it was obvious that it was hot. Ashes shrugged. "You are getting used to the consumption of magic power by always maintaining your transformation? It seems like a good way to practice." "I don't understand, what are you saying?" Lorgar waved her tail. "This is the price for this ability given by the three gods. It's not some kind of practice. I have no way to transform back to human form, so I can only live on as half human and half beast." So that was the case, Ashes realized. Because she did not want to expose her appearance, she had to wear a cloak even such a hot place, and revealing her animalized form once she was already on stage would make everyone think that she had transformed because she had entered the battle. So what the intelligence referred to as a monster was actually a wolf. She wasn't sure whether it would be effective or not to decrease Lorgar's fighting capacity by using a bone to allure her and distract her. At least for Maggie, that would be extremely effective. "What are laughing at?" Lorgar frowned. "Are you underestimating me?" "No, nothing." Ashes suppressed her smile. "I just remembered a funny friend. Since you are ready, let's begin." "My thoughts exactly." Lorgar raised both of her hands and the once smooth female arms transformed into a pair of thick wolf claws. "Father, please knock the gong." "Is this partial animalization through free will?" Ashes raised her eyebrows. Even though she was ignorant of the mysteries of magic power, she was still able to control and utilize her power properly. This was hard even for Maggie, and only in dangerous situations was she able to do it. As the chief of Wild Flame hit the gong with intense, Lorgar pushed with both feet and lunged towards her. The wolf girl's speed was pretty fast, but in the eyes of Ashes, it still wasn't that different from ordinary people's. She could even determine where the opponent's landing position would be and thus prepare her own attacking position in advance. But she didn't do it. Lorgar was obviously not using her full power but instead was planning to test her strength through such a move. So, Ashes decided to oppose her head-on in order to make her realize that she had no chance to defeat her unless she completely transformed first. She held out her hands and firmly grabbed Wolf Girl's paws like a pincer. Then she turned her body and, using her opponent's momentum, she held her above her shoulders and smashed her forcefully on the ground. This was the advantage of an extraordinary. Partial animalization meant only partially strengthened power for Lorgar. But as for Ashes, each of her fingers, each of her tendons were strengthened at all times. Magic power would strengthen her body every day, continuously, and no matter the time she would always feel her body surging with power. She punched downwards, smashing the ground where Lorgar was lying. As for the latter, she had rolled over to dodge her and then put her hands upside down, bent her knees and kicked towards her. But the kick that would have caused a viscera rupture on any adult was single-handedly grabbed by Ashes, who instantly squeezed it, peeling off the skin of Lorgar's calf, almost breaking it. At that moment, Wolf Girl realized the danger through her pain, kicked towards Ashes' head with her other foot while simultaneously transforming her foot into a wolf leg. Ashes loosened her 5 fingers and bent to escape the sweeping strike. Lorgar finally escaped and did not dare to keep on testing, so she transformed her other leg into a wolf leg too. As a result, all 4 of her limbs had been completely animalized, which not only increased her height quite a bit but also improved her speed and strength. As far as Ashes was concerned, her opponent's situation did not improve that much though. Any parts of her body that had not been animalized were obviously her weak spots. For example, the head and the abdomen. The extraordinary fiercely punched with 2 fists, forcing Lorgar to also use both of her paws to stop her. Then, she smirked, and before the wolf girl could realize what happened, she forcefully hit the other's forehead with her own. Woo! Princess Lorgar couldn't help but utter a painful cry, with tears and blood coming out simultaneously. The huge impact had crashed her nose and she was forced by the intense pain to close her eyes. Ashes turned around, kicked Lorgar's soft abdomen and sent her flying. Chapter 767, Extraordinary Training Method. The noisy field quietened down suddenly. No one could have expected that Lorgar would have fallen into a disadvantage so soon after the fighting began. From the looks of this round, Princess Lorgar of the Wild Flame clan was definitely wounded heavily. Only Ashes knew that she had not used her full power in that attack. At that moment she struck Wolf Girl. The other party had already speedily retreated backward and had slightly curled her body. Therefore the attack was not taken at a full blow. In the face of a heavy blow, Lorgar consciously avoided being in the scope of the enemy's attack. This indicated that even if she had not experienced the real battle of life and death, at least she had put in a lot of efforts in training. The girl fell to the ground and rolled around for 2 laps. Her body rapidly started to inflate, causing the clothes on her body to get torn to shreds. Her smooth skin exposed was covered by the fluffy light yellow mane. She looks different from Maggie. Ashes pondered. Fat Pigeon wraps herself up with hair and then transforms into a bird species, so this could be considered a purely physical change. No wonder she chooses to fight barefoot before, as she knows that every time she animalizes into a beast, she'll ruin a pair of shoes. That will be a heavy burden even for a big clan. By contrast, Maggie was much more economical. Not only would she not damage her clothes, but she could also wrap her package in her hair, and most of the time that meant she could carry an extra luggage. Ow 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 woo. When Lorgar stopped rolling, her body had completely changed its appearance. A huge desert wolf appeared on the platform. Ashes had seen these wolves with yellow fur on her way to and from the Land of Fire. Compared to the snow wolves at Western region, their fur was not only stubby and hard, but they were also thinner in shape. After sunset, their eyes would occasionally emit a green light, and they constantly had an insatiable look. Obviously, they led different lives from their same kind in the misty forest. Other than the lack of rich rations, they also faced the threat of other brutal predators. But this wolf in front of her was way too large. Even a horse would be dwarfed beside her. Just her limbs alone were already half a head higher than Ash's. If Lorger stood on her hind legs, that would be the height of 2 adult men. And her severely damaged nose was also reflected in the animalized body. The cocked bridge of her nose had a collapsed part, and the nostrils also blew out hot air and streaks of fresh blood. Lorger howled loudly and caused the onlookers at Sand Nation to gasp in astonishment. Not only Ash's, but it was the first time for everyone around to witness the changing process of the strongest goddess in the southernmost region. It was natural for them to feel great pressure and fear standing under such a burly body. Without waiting for their inhaling sounds to subside, Wolf Girl sprang forward toward Ash's again. This time Ash's looked more serious, as the latter's speed had almost reached the level of the god's punishment warriors. And with such a huge figure, its power certainly could not be underestimated. She avoided Lorger's thrust by moving aside and immediately realized that she had made the wrong move. Wolf Girl's range after animalizing was too wide. Compared with the god's punishment army warrior that had the same size as common people, she often only needed to move 1 step to dodge the attack. And with 2 or 3 steps she could even counterattack. But for the giant beast, the number of steps needed to be increased at least several times. Right now, Ash's barely avoided the attack, before the other party struck with her right claw and hit her like a huge wall. Boom! Being unable to avoid the attack, she had no choice but to lift her arms to block the attack head-on. Although the collision gave both sides exactly the same impact, the advantages of body shape at this moment were very clear. Lorger's whole body trembled due to the impact, while Ash's was completely thrown out flying. Under the platform, Echo could not help grabbing Andrea's wrist. Ash's? Will she be all right? After animalizing into a huge beast, the situation was reversed. Princess Lorger of the Wild Flame clan kept pursuing Ash's, and the latter could only use most of her energy to defend and dodge with almost no way of fighting back. Although both were unarmed, each of their kicks and punches was as sharp as an iron hammer at this level. Several wounds appeared on Ash's body, and the blood gradually dyed her robes red. Don't worry, an attack like this won't cost her her life. She still hasn't given all her force. Andrea continued and said, Ash's may not have many strengths, but she is exceptional at resisting attacks. Not yet given her all? Echo was startled and said, but she's obviously panting, and she doesn't look at all relaxed. Do you know the extraordinary training method during the Tequila Age? Andrea asked in return. No, what's that? It's a way to speed up the consumption of magic power so that one can be in training mode all the time. According to His Majesty Roland, this was both ancient and inefficient, hence it would be better to study 2 more books to analyze how muscles and bones can convert chemical energy into mechanical energy. She chuckled and said, but I think for someone with the intelligence of Ash's, she might be particularly suitable for this stupid method. After all, letting her read a book was simply too difficult. Is that so? Echo widened her mouth in surprise. Of course, said Andrea gracefully while she smoothed the ends of her hair. Look, she's going to fight back. As soon as Ash's managed to distance herself from her opponent, she pulled out a black tape from within her arms. What's that? Said Lorger, who stopped in her tracks and shouted, is that a weapon? The crowd was also stirred up. The agreement of the holy duel was sanctioned by the 3 gods and deserters would be eternally spurned. So no one violated this even if it was not checked by anyone. Ashes smiled and casually threw the cloth strap on the ground. It looked like a waist strap, but it made a dull crash when it fell on the ground as if she had thrown a heavy stone, instead of a gentle piece of cloth. Wolf Girl's howling suddenly contracted. However, this was not the only burden. Then she crouched down and took the 2 pieces of black tape that were tied to her ankles. They looked ordinary but were handmade by Soraya. If they were ordinary fabrics, even the most sturdy canvas would not last more than a week. The cloth strap was divided into 3 layers. The innermost one was hollow, and filled with special iron bars. Each short part weighed about 10 pounds. The cloth strap for the waist would be equivalent to the weight of carrying an adult person. When she stood up again, she felt her whole body full of strength again, and the long-lost sense of ease once again returned to her body. Extraordinaries were this kind of thing to practice. The faster the magic is consumed, the stronger the body gets. Ashes still remembered what Agatha said at that time. Even many people bring them to the battlefield, and at the most crucial moment, the most unexpected power could be released. If all went well and you persisted for 5 to 6 years, you could even hope to break through the body's shackles and become a transcendent. And now, just over a year and 3 months have passed. Chapter 768, Bloodbath Battle. This was the first time Ashes initiated the attack since Princess Lorgar of the Wild Flame clan had completely animalized. Lorgar also did not back down and lifted her body toward her opponent. But this time she found that her attacks could no longer be coherent, and even with a wide range of sweeping strike, it was difficult to force the other party to block or counterattack. She was always a little slower than Ashes. She could hit Ashes before, but now she could only tear off a corner of her clothing. And more often than not, she could not reach anything. After fighting for a moment, Wolf Girl had to use a strong tactic. When her right claw was unsuccessful, she had to use the remainder of her strength to rotate her body, and use her stout tail to hit the other party. This tactic allowed her to instantly place half of the platform within her attacking range. Even if Ashes were quick on her feet, it would be impossible to retreat completely, unless she had no intention from the start to approach. A tail like an iron whip could easily scrape off fresh flesh, and most of the wounds on Ashes were left behind by this move. However, the expected crash did not come. Sounds of exclamation could be heard coming from the platform. Oh no! Lorgar's heart suddenly had a bad premonition, and at the same time, she saw a fallen figure from the corner of her eye. She can fly? All the bystanders were staring with their eyes wide open. They saw Ashes levitating even over the top of Wolf Girl, who was half a head taller than her, and she landed directly on the turning head of her opponent. Tail attacks had a wide range, yet could only sweep close to the ground raid without being a threat to mid-air targets. However, it would be extremely difficult for most people to jump over such a great distance. As it would be easy for opponents to judge the landing point leading to the inevitable next attack, so few people would jump into a duel. Unfortunately, after Wolf Girl rotated her body to do a sweeping strike, her tail part became her blind zone. Ashes no longer chose to show mercy, but smashed her fist into Lorgar's eye, causing the eyeballs to split open suddenly. A mass of blood splashed over half of her body, and severe pain caused the latter to scream out hoarsely. Even if the body could bear the attack, the organs such as the eyes were still very fragile parts. After losing one eye, the duel had quickly tilted its balance in favor toward the extraordinary. However, just as Ashes aimed to withdraw her fist and give her opponent a chance to surrender, she found that Lorgar's eye was closed and her right hand was gripped tightly by her eyelids and face muscles. In the meantime, a giant claw came flashing toward Ashes. Even if this claw managed to wound her, it would also increase the trauma of Wolf Girl's eye. Lorgar showed that she was determined to fight. Normally, imprisonment like this would be unable to trap the extraordinary witch, but just slowed down her actions by a little. But at such a critical moment, even a breath of time could be extremely deadly. Ashes knew very well that she could not avoid it, so she did not hesitate and lifted the other arm to face the attack head-on. She seemed to have heard the sound of her broken bones caused by the tremendous impact. She sprayed out a mouthful of fresh blood. This was probably the first time after the duel started that she was really hit. As the two separated, Ashes noticed that her left arm had been bent into a weird shape. Roar! Lorgar roared loudly and rushed towards Ashes with her mouth wide open, ready to bite. Instead of retreating, Ashes rolled forward. She escaped the other party's bite and crawled under the blind zone of Wolf Girl's neck. Then with one hand holding the ground, she kicked both legs to the other's forelimb. With a loud noise, the forelimb bent out like a folding door. And at this point, the three-legged Wolf Girl almost lost her ability to attack. Lorgar, that's enough. The head of Wildflame Wells shouted. No, I can still fight. Lorgar replied breathlessly. Her situation isn't much better. I just need to hold on for a while, and it'll be all right. Ashes licked the bloodstains from the corner of her mouth, and could not help but laugh. Her opponent was right, as her situation was indeed not too good. The heavy blow caused her whole body to ache and her internal organs felt like they had shifted positions. Her arm was also broken and drooping weakly beside her. She looked as pathetic as the one-eyed giant wolf that was standing with 3 legs. However, a man could move by 2 legs, but a wolf could not. Coupled with the loss of one eye, the limited vision would further hinder Wolf Girl's action. If she could not accurately hit the enemy, then being strong and powerful would be meaningless. This was what she had learned from her experience of fighting with the gods' punishment warriors. The other thing that could be confirmed was that she was now a lot stronger than she was a year ago. This was particularly obvious when she received that great impact. Ashes could clearly feel the magic power in her body flow faster than ever before, and time seemed to slow down in that instant. She could even see the claws and meat pad that kept coming close toward her. And most of the magic gathered in her forearm, so she had an unprecedented strength. If it were her in the past, this strike would not only have broken that arm that was used as a shield, but would have also cracked her ribs and internal organs. But for now, she just felt pain and not numbness nor weakness. Was this what Agatha meant by the life and death sentiment? She felt as if she was standing in front of a thick door. If Wolf Girl could partially control her magic power to partly animalize her own body, could the extraordinary apply the same method each time to attack with a strength beyond the limits of her own power? This may be a worthwhile exercise. Of course, the most important thing now is to resolve this duel. If I break even the other eye, she will have no choice but to admit defeat, right? Anyway, with the help of Leaf's herbs, she could stay alive. As long as she could be towed back to the western region, Nana would be able to heal her back to brand new. Ashes took a deep breath and bent down slightly. Lorgar also got ready for an attacking stance and exposed her fangs at the same time. Both of them knew that the next blow would be the final blow for both parties, no matter what the outcome was. Only one person would be standing on the platform. The heavy atmosphere infected all the spectators and the entire scene was silent, leaving only the sound of the burning ground. Just as Ashes was about to move, there was a sudden scream from Echo. "Be careful, overhead." She rapidly looked up and saw a huge monster rushing down that had expanded wings even wider than the platform. Its claws were like open blades, and as thick as an arm. Only when it got close to the ground, could she hear the hiss of the airstream passing over its wings. Ashes jumped aside with her greatest strength to avoid the monster's diving attack range. And through the corner of her eye, she saw that Lorgar was also trying to dodge its attack. But because of her broken forelimbs, she was unable to and got hit directly by the enemy. With a boom, the platform was smashed into several cracks by this meteoroid-like impact. Lorgar cried out piercing screams. Chapter 769, Unyielding Will. By the name of 3 gods. That's the 4-winged eagle. How dare this beast break into the burning shrine? Help, help me. Guards, where are the guards? Screams of panic and disbelief came from the crowd. Some of the Sand Nation people pulled out their weapons and climbed up the platform to save Lorgar, while the others wanted to flee. The scene suddenly became quite chaotic. Ashes could see clearly through the smoke that the bird was actually a giant demonic beast. It resembled a demonic hybrid of an eagle and a beetle. The back, lower abdomen, and head were covered with a striped shell. It had 6 claws and each section could be clearly seen. The front pair was the thickest and held Lorgar firmly on the ground like an iron clamp. The 4 pairs of wings, which should have been as thin as cicada wings, were thick like bird wings and became its most striking feature. Nature could never produce such an ugly monster. The demonic beast kept trying to peck her neck while pressing down Wolf Girl. Its claws could not be avoided, and Wolf Girl could only sway from left to right to avoid the attack. The inability to move her body greatly limited the range that she could dodge. In a short time, her cheek already suffered a few scratches, and the fresh blood stained her fur. By the look of things, she would not be able to hold for a long time and would be killed by the demonic beast. Ashes would definitely not allow it to happen. Ashes assisted Iron Axe in participating in the desert mission because of Tilly. Using the holy duel to decide victory was also the choice of the latter. She had the aid of Leaf's herbs and Nana's treatment, so she took this matter very seriously in order not to let Lorgar down. However, Lorgar was still a witch, and so long as she was not evil like a pure witch, there was no way Ashes could sit by idly and let her die in the hands of the demonic beast. Echo! Ashes shouted, and then plunged toward the demonic hybrid. She clung to its mouth at that moment when it was trying to peck again. The sharp corner of its mouth scratched her arm and the blood dripped bit by bit on Wolfgirl's face, but she was still motionless. Wolfgirl looked up at Ashes weakly with her remaining eye. Her dark pupil revealed a complex look. At the same time, Echo's lullaby could be heard. The music gradually dispersed everyone's panic and soothed the crowd that was trying to escape. Without the interference from the surrounding crowd, repeated gunfire sounds could be heard from where Andrea was standing. She was different from the first army that might accidentally wound the witch. Her precise shooting ability ensured that as long as there was a glimmer of space, she could hit the target perfectly. Ashes saw Lorgar's claws tremble fiercely. Then several rounds of bullets hit the same joint position, breaking the four-winged eagle's claws directly into two pieces. After losing the clamp, Lorgar rolled up and kicked the beast's belly, and kicked it out. The latter flapped its wings and rose again. Only now did the first army squad ring out the gunshots for the very first time. Unfortunately, it was not so easy to hit a flying target that could circle or swing up and down and was behaving more like an erratic insect than a bird. "Are you okay?" Ashes took off her black robe and covered the diminishing body of the huge wolf. "Temporarily. Ahem, I won't die yet." Lorgar, that had regained her human form, coughed out a mouthful of blood foam, and struggled to climb up but failed several times. "Don't move around or else you will aggravate your wounds." Ashes groped along her body and discovered that one side of the chest was sunken down and she could feel the bumps of the raised bones. It was clear that several ribs were broken in the previous violent impact. It was fortunate that the wolf form could resist the impact of the heavy attacks. If she had retained her human form, that attack would have probably taken her life. Wild Flame Clan warriors also surrounded the area with their short bows and aimed toward the demonic beast in the sky. But even firearms could not be effective at this distance, therefore arrows were even more useless. "Watch out. It's coming again." Echo warned everyone again. "Everyone get out of the way." Ashes hugged Lorgar and rolled on the spot to avoid the grazing attack of the demonic beast. Several clan warriors were unable to avoid it and were thrown out with their chests heavily deflated, so they were unlikely to survive. The four-winged eagle obviously had a high level of intelligence. It seemed to realize that the only thing that could threaten it was the rifle held by Andrea. When it was diving and attacking Lorgar, it would always use its abdomen's shell to face the blonde witch. It also followed a rocking motion and a polyline flight path. When Andrea was refilling, the demonic beast would throw the people it captured toward Hummingbird and Echo to obstruct her filling action and also rotate the direction of attack. Andrea avoided the danger several times by a thin thread. In addition to paying attention to the movements of the demonic beast, she also had to take care of the other two partners. If she had not mastered the new evolutionary skills that enabled her to release a strong airstream at close range, she would have been thrown down ages ago by the demonic beast. Ashes could not help frowning as this four-winged eagle seemed like it was targeting the witches. If it simply wanted to prey on food, the platform was full of people, and no one would have stopped it from taking away one or two people. But it dived repeatedly to attack Lorgar or would stare at Andrea and the other witches. It showed no interest in the ordinary people and was vastly different from the rumored brutal and bloodthirsty assailant. The First Army had only 50 soldiers that entered the Land of Fire and were no help in dealing with a flexible target in the air. Ashes thought it was necessary to lead it to the top of the large army and hopefully, it could be shot down with more intense gunfire. But, what exactly needed to be done? At this moment, Lorgar grabbed her hand. Throw me upwards. Wolf Girl gasped and spoke one word at a time. What? Ahem. Throw me up. She repeated. When it's coming toward us, that's the only chance I can catch it. I can't act on my own, I can only depend on you. If you don't succeed, you may die here, said Ashes. A warrior's second home has always been the battlefield, said Lorgar, with her ears drooping down. So at least I've resisted until the very end. You are the most powerful warrior I've ever met. Ahem. You've given me the chance to experience such a wonderful fight. Thank you. Ashes saw a firm resolve from her expression and nodded after a moment of silence. I see. But you're mistaken, it's not our last fight. Even if I manage to stay alive, it will be impossible for me to stand like a normal person. You don't need to comfort me. She laughed at herself. Even if she could recover from such heavy wounds, she would still be disabled. Perhaps death would be a better option for her. There's a witch called Nana in Neverwinter of Grey Castle, who can heal any man back to brand new. Even someone who's breathing his last or whose limbs are entirely broken, said Ashes, slightly widening her mouth. The wolf's ears became erect in the blink of an eye. What you just said, is that true? Of course, I have gone through no less than 100 battles like this one, and there were even more powerful enemies. And if you want to hone your skills, you can find opportunities at any time. So if you live, Ashes stopped here without finishing what she wanted to say, as she realized that the other party's remaining eye now reflected a brand new light. I'll survive, for sure. Well, come up then. Ashes no longer hesitated and grabbed Lorgar's foot with one hand. She took advantage of Four-Winged Eagle diving toward the center of the platform, to fling herself around for 2 turns before throwing Lorgar out. Princess Lorgar of the Wild Flame clan was like a flying arrow with her black robes, aiming at the monster that was flying straight down. Chapter 770, Echo and Drow Silvermoon. Saya. The Four-Winged Eagle let out a peculiar high-pitched sound as it probably did not expect the other party to take the initiative in attacking it. It opened its beak and without a moment to spare, immediately attacked Lorgar without bothering to dodge. What happened next shook the hearts of the onlookers. Lorgar instantly transformed into a massive desert wolf and smacked the strange bird's face with thunderous strength. The eagle's head bent to one side and its beak that was originally able to pick up an adult with ease suddenly broke away. It was then already too late for the demonic hybrid to adjust its balance, so the two beasts just fiercely collided with each other. Lorgar once again spits out fresh blood, but she still tightly grabbed on to the demonic beast, and her teeth sank deeply into its flesh. The demonic beast sensed danger from the desert wolf clinging onto her and desperately flapped its wings trying to fly up. However, no matter how hard it moved its wings, it was unable to gain altitude due to the wolf girl who weighed as heavy as itself. Andrea! Ashes shouted at her companion. I knew that you would have to depend on me eventually, said Andrea. She threw her rifle back to Echo and leaped up the platform while summoning the magical longbow. At the same time, the two beasts smashed down heavily onto the platform. With a flash of white light, the desert wolf which was sitting on top of the Four-Winged Eagle suddenly disappeared. Ashes knew then that Lorgar had already reached her limit. But fortunately, the outcome of this battle had already been decided. She took a Dead Sand Nation warrior's robe and rushed toward the demonic beast. Upon closer inspection, she could see that the demonic beast's back and the abdominal shell was pockmarked with several wounds. Some were scratches, while others were small holes that oozed green slime and blue blood. These wounds were probably left by the First Army, but none of them had inflicted fatal damage to the demonic beast. She quickly found the motionless Princess Lorgar in the gap between the wings and carried her down the platform. From the corner of her eye, she saw the longbow in Andrea's hands shining with golden light. The hybrid demonic beast that had been wounded quite severely had its head swaying and was staggering on the ground when it suddenly found something resembling a golden sun next to it. Hey, what are you looking at? Andrea laughed mockingly. Fly away if you can. Shriek. It finally recovered its senses and tried spreading its wings in a panic to escape. But it was too late. A blinding ray of light shot out from the magical longbow, and with a thundering whistle, it pierced through the demonic beast's body. In a flash, its body suddenly started emitting countless beams of golden light, as if a sun was trying to break out of its body and began engulfing it in its glow. As it quieted down, a circular crater a few meters wide appeared in the middle of the platform. All that was left of the four-winged eagle was a piece of its body lying on the edge of the gap, and its remaining body parts were splattered all over the place like tiny droplets of rain. Andrea stood proudly in this torrential rain of flesh and gore, with her golden bow giving her long hair and alluring figure an eye-catching silhouette. "Why are you still materializing your longbow? Are you wasting your magical power?" Ashes, who was under the platform, got grumpy and stood up. "Of course, it's for the people here to remember my heroic appearance, sh*t. She suddenly covered her mouth halfway through her sentence. "It's all your fault for making me talk. What if some bird meat fell into my mouth?" Ashes could only roll her eyes at that. The wild flame chief Gwels had an ashen face as he gently received his daughter from Ashes. With his shoulders slightly quivering, he said, "Is Lorger? She's still alive, but it doesn't look good. Even the best herbal remedies can only delay her death." Ashes shrugged and said, "Unless we treat her immediately." "You have a way to cure her?" "That's right, and she can be as healthy as she was before the duel." Gwels stared with his eyes wide open and gazed at the extraordinary witch for a while before finally slowly opening his mouth. "Then, what's the price?" "You'll know soon enough," Ashes tugged her hand and said, "but what I want to know is, will you acknowledge the result of the holy duel? Wild Flame isn't Iron Whip, and we won't deny a victory that was won through blood and honor. Furthermore," Gwels sighed and said, "no one can deny that you are currently the strongest clan. If you don't believe, you can listen for yourself." Ashes have certainly heard it. Be it on the platform or the burning road, every single person present was shouting a single name in unison. "Osha! Osha! Osha!" It was among this cheer that Echo climbed up to the platform. "I am the chief of the Osha clan, Drow Silvermoon, but I also have another name, Echo of Greycastle's Witch Union." Her voice sounded clearly above the noise of the crowd and reached everyone's ears. "I have lost everything since the betrayal of the Iron Whip clan. Not only was my clan exiled, but I was also sold into slavery, from the port of Clearwater, all the way to the king's city in Greycastle. I was fortunate enough to be rescued by a witch organization. After that, I was transferred to a small town in the western region, where my name has been changed to Echo." She paused momentarily, then said, "I prefer the name Echo more than Drow Silvermoon, though I have been through some painful experiences. I am so much happier than I ever was in the desert. That town, which was once a desolate town on the border, has now become a bustling city. Most of the growth during this period was brought by a lord, His Majesty Roland Wimbledon of Greycastle, and he was also the one who changed my destiny." Ashes were stunned. "This doesn't sound like the rehearsed speech." "Well," said Andrea, with a light chuckle, "it's what she's been wanting to say the most. And besides, all we can do now is applaud her." In the beginning, Echo seemed a bit nervous, but once she started talking about Neverwinter's interesting lifestyle, she began to talk with increasing confidence. "I know you are curious as to why I'm saying all these things. After all, it's just someplace in the north. No matter how beautiful it has nothing to do with our people in the Sand Nation." "That's right. Maybe this was the way it used to be, but now things are not the same. His Majesty's catchphrase is that Neverwinter will never discriminate based on origin. His city has people from all kinds of backgrounds, ordinary people from Greycastle, witches, and even people from foreign clans. This is enough to prove his kindness and benevolence. Now he intends to save the Irons and people of the Majin clan from this blood-soaked, barren desert and grant you all a better life, just like he did when he helped the witches, and I'm carrying out the will of His Majesty, Roland Wimbledon, to deliver this news to all of you in the name of the strongest clan. He has decided to become the chief of the Majin clan to unify the entire desert and treat us all as his people." Chapter 771, Desert Promise. What is a chief? Sounds like the head of all the clans. Isn't that the same as the three gods' emissary? The crowd began to discuss. At that moment, the head of the Black River clan that had descended to fourth place, jumped onto the platform and questioned loudly, "But the king of the northern kingdom you mentioned, Roland Wimbledon, is not a Majans. How could he rule the entire desert?" Here it is, Ash's thought. This is one of the key problems that they have to deal with if they want to put the southernmost region into the prefecture of Grey Castle. I'll see how Echo handles it. Echo looked at him and asked peacefully, "Were the three gods emissaries who used to rule the desert Majans?" Her voice was not high, yet with the help of her magic power, it traveled to everyone's ears. The head of the Black River clan was startled when he heard it. Well. We all know that the answer is negative. Echo noticed his silence, so she looked under the platform and said, "The three gods' emissaries were real giants. It said that they didn't have uniform looks. One of them had 4 feet and 3 hands and another had more than one head. Undoubtedly, they were not Majans." At this point, she began to speak in a much higher pitch. "The few words left by the emissaries have become principles that are abided by all irons and people of the Majin clan. The laws carved onto the slate tells us about the desert rulers. One is being blessed by the three gods, the other is opening up boundless oases and keeping all the clans away from hunger, thirst, and death. Anyone who could accomplish any of those can become the ruler of the southernmost region." The discussion in the crowd quieted down. Nobody wanted to object the laws left by the three gods' emissaries at the Land of Fire. In fact, the holy duel was a way to decide power distribution originated from the laws. But the three gods' emissaries did bring green land to the desert. The head of the Black River clan did not want to be neglected. He pointed at Echo and raised his voice. "It said that 1,000 years ago, this area was an oasis. Is the king of Grey Castle capable of that? Don't be deceived by false benefits. Anyone who owns that kind of power is not different from the deity. So as long as he could bring new oases to the Sand Nation, you'd admit that His Majesty is qualified of ruling the southernmost region and consider him as the chief, right?" Echo said with a smile. "That's right. Not only me, I'm afraid all the other clans would agree with me." The head of the Black River clan kept his mouth shut for the first condition and took most of the audience's opinions as his own. Indeed, His Majesty can't convert the southernmost region into a green land, but he's willing to take our land into the territory of Grey Castle and offer us residences near lakes and forests to keep us from the threats of thirst and sandstorm forever. Echo returned to the platform and said word by word, "This is the promise His Majesty made. He'll bring you a new oasis. The vast and rich northern area is exactly the boundless green oasis whose color will never fade." Everybody was startled and could barely believe what they had heard. Thuram was equally shocked. This is the real purpose of the Osha clan. That is the meaning of the new oasis and New Order Iron Axe mentioned. It has always been every Majin's dream to live in an oasis that is forever green. Such a temptation is unimaginable, especially to those small clans that are too weak to grab a piece of the Iron Sand City. Although big clans might be hesitant and unwilling to see a drastic change in the southernmost region's order, they could not prevent the transmission of this message. Probably within half a month, this astonishing message would spread through the entire desert by the clansmen on spot from every Silver Stream oasis. "No, this is absolutely nonsense. It's a lie, a fraud," the head of the Black River clan shouted. "Have you forgotten the tragic ending of the Blackbone clan and the Sandstone clan? Didn't they die out and become extinct because they easily believed what Garcia, the Queen of Clearwater, said? Offering us an oasis and a source of water? The cunning northerners will never do that. They'll only give you a pond, or a piece of land as big as my palm, making you fight for these resources unceasingly as you did in the southernmost region where you have to work to death for them." Thuram imperceptibly sighed. If it were before the holy duel, this speech could have suppressed people's aspirations, but it's too late now. In 5 duels, no one was killed. The merciful image of the Osha clan had spread through the small oasis. People could easily imagine that the Northern Kingdom's king who was supporting Osha was equally merciful. Obviously, someone merciful would not oppress the Sand Nation people as the Queen of Clearwater had done. Even challengers like Blackbone and Sandstone were willing to sell themselves cheap to Garcia, which was an indication of how attractive a land of survival was to them. Even if it might be a trap, some clansmen would like to take the risk. If the King of Greycastle sincerely wished to take the southernmost region into his domain, those pioneers would definitely become the examples for other clans to follow. As long as it started, the northwards migration of the whole Sand Nation would become inevitable. This king obviously had all his moves well planned, making a show of strength to draw the clan's attention, killing nobody in duels to build a merciful image, becoming the chief of all clans by indisputably winning the holy duels and making the other forgiven major clans reluctant to turn against Osha under everybody's attention. Thuram thought he would play a fairly important role in the process of the Osha clan settling in the Iron Sand City, but now he found that his role was only to supply Osha with his clansmen and information about the major clans in Iron Sand City. As to the real plan, he was totally kept in the dark. Echo did not take stationing in the Iron Sand City seriously, and revenge was only as easy as lifting a hand to her. Thuram could not help but feel lost. But after a short while, he rose with spirit again. If everything would go as the new leader said, Osha would undoubtedly become beyond the strongest clan. Then as a member of the Osha, he obviously would gain great benefits. In the face of this promising future, why bother feeling lost for the moment? As expected, Echo slightly shook her head. "You're wrong, Chief. What Garcia needs are mercenaries, not common clansmen," which was her biggest difference with His Majesty, which was also the reason why she picked Blackbone and Sandstone, who had stronger fighting capacities. Yet His Majesty won't do that. He considers all the Mahjans as his own subjects, so any clans here can go to the Kingdom of Greycastle, regardless of how many young adults they have or whether they're powerful. His Majesty doesn't need the Sand Nation people to die for him. No merciful king would sit by and watch his subjects dying in vain. What do you want in return? We ought to pay something for that. The Wild Flame Chief Gulls stood up and said, "He won't help the Sand Nation for nothing. I don't believe there is such a thing as free lunch." He clenched the teeth. "Tell me. I'm willing to accept it." "What His Majesty wants from you is simple, which is to work," Echo said frankly. "Like the other tens of thousands his subjects, work for the kingdom, work for yourself. You'll get paid, improve your lives, receive education and bring up children. That's all he wants." Is that all?" Gwells was startled. "That's right. A way of living your life without fighting and struggling." Echo raised her tone again. "Everyone knows that there are fewer and fewer silver stream oases. In my childhood, I could occasionally see oases near the south point of the Endless Cape. But now, the white wasteland near the northwest area is constantly expanding. The oases are deteriorating into sandy soil. Even the small oases around the Iron Sand City have shrunk. Do Mahjans intend to keep on fighting and killing for living places, immersing the yellow sand with your blood and eventually disappearing with the oases in the southernmost region? Tell me, are you willing to accept this consequence?" "No, my lady. I'd like to go with you, Lady Silvermoon. Please take me with you." Noises, like rolling waves, spread from the center of the platform to the surrounding areas. Looking at the extremely pretty girl on the platform who'd drawn most of the clan's attention, Iron Axe could not help kneeling down with warm tears shedding. He had dreamed of this occurring countless times, especially that night when the Osha clan became qualified for a duel participant. But when he woke up, the clan had disappeared and the princess had become a slave. He thought he would not live to see this happening. But now, what Echo had accomplished was even further than he had dreamed. Although he even dropped tears over this, within his heart he was fulfilled and proud. Osha finally gains the three gods' favor. I understand there are still people hesitating, but soon what I said will be proved. Echo raised her right hand and said, "Those clans who want to follow me to the southern territories of Greycastle may pack right now and meet me at the small oasis before departure. Those who can't leave right away need not worry. I'll leave staff behind to guide those who wish to find suitable living places in the Northern Kingdom." As long as you abide by the Grey Castle laws, you're His Majesty's subjects and will be protected. Grey Castle's door is always open to you. Nobody knew how the cheer started. But it was like a drop of ink falling into water. Soon it rippled and spread to the entire land of fire. The major clans still remained silent. But compared with the crowd under the platform, they were insignificant. The sounds of the clans from every corner of the Silver Stream exceeded that of those from Iron Sand City for the first time. A crack appeared on the primitive and stiff order. A new order was taking shape at the riot of sounds. Tiny and immature as it might seem, but it exuded infinite vitality. The crowd began to kneel down to cheer for the new strongest clan, as well as to bow to the chief. Not everybody had the nerve to be a pioneer, but there were always people who were brave enough to sacrifice everything for the evergreen land in their heart. On that day, the cheers spread unceasingly through the land of fire. From that day on, the desert had a new leader. Chapter 772, The Arrival of the Relics. With the help of a sigil of listening, Roland received the result for the last holy duel, including everything that happened in the land of fire, by that afternoon. Instantly he summoned Maggie, Lightning, and Nana to his office. There is a severely wounded witch in the Iron Sand City who needs your treatment. Roland looked at the 3 energetic girls, no, 2 girls and 1 legal girl, and said, prepare tonight and leave tomorrow. No need for haste as long as you arrive at Fallen Dragon Ridge by tomorrow evening and reach Iron Sand City the following day. Ashes will be there to receive you. Do both of us need to go? Lightning asked, indicating Maggie and herself. Yes. I feel better when you're together, Roland said, nodding. Besides, Maggie needs to be assisted when tying Nana onto her back, doesn't she? Remember to wear more clothing, it's hard to fly in freezing weather. Nana couldn't help but shiver when she looked out the window at the falling snow. Understood. I promise, she will be delivered on time. Maggie said as she raised her hand. Flying there is not a problem, Lightning pouted, but, if you want to start exploring the snow mountain, please wait until I come back. Missing it would have me in tears. The moment when a great explorer cries, that's definitely a scene worth recording. Noticing the serious expression on Lightning's face, Roland couldn't help but laugh. He knew that since the news about the possibility of a relic on the snow mountain had spread, Lightning had been looking forward to it. Of course, you're all crucial members of the expedition. I can assure you of that. That's settled then. Lightning patted her chest in relief as she said, you can counting on us, we'll cure the wounded sister. You can also tend to other Sand Nation civilians along the way. But, don't stay for too long. Roland kept on going, you should return on the day Nana has exhausted her magic power and take the same route when you return. Understand? With the relocation of tequila survivors drawing to an end, he should start an expedition to the snow mountain. However, without Nana staying in Neverwinter, he did not dare to hastily send the witches to that unknown land. Yes, Your Majesty. All right. Coo. The 3 of them answered simultaneously. After they had left, Roland leaned on his chair and let out a sigh of relief. Nightingale stuck her head out from behind Roland as she asked, does this mean that you've successfully taken over the southernmost region? I'd say we've only taken the first step, Roland said, smiling. There are still many things to do. After over a month of fighting, the desert mission had come to a temporary truce. Unfortunately, the following migration was going to be the challenging task. Roland fetched the map from the corner of his desk and laid it out. His sight landed on the southern territory of Grey Castle. He had conveyed his plan to offer the Sand Nation civilians a new oasis before Iron Axe had departed. The preferred location would be the border area that had lost a lord and most of its populace. It had been successively struck by civil wars that had been started by Timothy and Garcia. The main cities like the port of Clearwater and Eagle City had been turned into ruins. The surrounding small towns and farmland had also been destroyed. With the refugees flowing into Neverwinter, the Southern Territory became a desolate wasteland. Rather than leaving them to ruin, Roland decided to let the Sand Nation reclaim them. They could start at the junctions, between the desert and green land, and gradually rebuild the port of Clearwater. By doing this, workers who were exploiting Blackwater could start off at the port of Clearwater and reach the southern point of the desert by sea. According to Iron Axe's report, most of the underground Styx's rivers lay to the south of the Land of Fire, mostly under the Endless Cape. In that area, Blackwater tributaries flowed close to the ground and near the coastline. When compared to the danger-ridden land route, traveling along the coastline was much safer apparently. Given the present technology level of Neverwinter, the coastline was undoubtedly the preferred exploitation location. It would take some time for these events to take effect in the southernmost region. Clans that heard the news might not leave for the Southern Territory immediately. Regardless, the temptation of an oasis would be irresistible to the Sand Nation civilians. Even if only a few clans moved there in the beginning, eventually more would follow and ultimately become Roland's subjects. Thus, not only would he gain a large labor force and prevent the land from going to waste, but the revived residents would also stop the roving bandits that traveled inland. This made it so Roland didn't need to deploy a large force of manpower to work in the desert, and the subjects that wanted to live in the Southern Territory would also find an abode. Of course, there were hidden dangers as well. One challenge would be merging his people with the Irons and people of the Majin clan. Yet, Roland wasn't overly concerned. Leaving aside the unawakened democracy, this world's religions were thought-provoking enough. They didn't require one to be too religious, but more like a pure nature worship. Both of the nations used the same language. The Sand Nation's lifestyle and customs were not so much a special culture, but more of an adaptation to the desert. Iron Axe and Echo were perfect examples. The two of them had roamed all the way to Border Town, and fit in well without too much difficulty. As long as his law enforcement was strict and the punishments and rewards were fair, Roland believed that the Irons and people of the Majin clan would also become qualified workers. Just in case there was a rebellion, the first army that had been stationed in the Southern Territory and Fallen Dragon Ridge happened to be more than mere ornaments. The more pressing issue Roland cared about was following up on the hybrid demonic beasts Iron Axe mentioned, that had attacked the witches. If his recollection was accurate, it sounded like an unavoidable accident had caused the desertification of the southernmost region. Geographically speaking, this piece of pointy land adjacent to the mainland was not far from Greycastle, which made such an abrupt change happening highly unlikely. Unfortunately, for the moment, he was too short-handed to explore the southernmost region, so he would have to ignore this quandary temporarily. While what the demonic hybrid did was inconceivable, this abnormal life form owned a modicum of intelligence. Roland had learned this from his own experience, so, what had driven it to attack the witches despite the risk? If the inland demonic beasts had sieged the human cities under the influence of the relics of gods, then the four-winged eagle had obviously attacked witches for some other reason. While Roland was thinking hard, Wendy and Phyllis knocked on the door before they walked in. "Your Majesty, the last batch of facilities that had been shipped from Tequila will arrive at the third border city soon. Pasha invited you to meet her underground." Finally they arrived. Roland became excited when he heard the news. The so-called third border city was actually an underground bunker that had been built under the impassable mountain range. This place functioned similar to a city and essentially served as a secret stronghold. The last batch of facilities was the instrument of divine retribution and the relics of gods. To ensure their safe arrival, the first army that had been stationed at Neverwinter provided the escort. What about the demonic beasts? Any movement? No sign of a massive gathering for the moment. Is that so? Roland stood up and said, "Let's get started then." Chapter 773, The Third Border City. The entrance to the cave was located to the north of Neverwinter. It could be found in the juncture between the city and the mountain range. On the nearby hillside, there was the ever-busy mining and furnace areas. Near the foot of the mountain, a solid concrete wall appeared in front of everybody. Although there were many facilities still under construction, this place had already become the most heavily guarded area in Neverwinter. There was a watchtower on each one of its corners and wired netting lining the top of it. There was also a machine gun blockhouse on each side of the gate. The guards saluted Roland as he walked through the gate and into the yard. Upon walking into the yard, he faintly felt as if he had traveled back to the modern world. What he saw in here was definitely not supposed to be in this era. There was a huge cave that had its entrance covered with concrete. The cave was over 10 meters wide and over 5 meters tall. The two grand iron doors were oversized compared to the entrance, and their thickness reached an astonishing 1 meter. They were not solid poured but were rather jointed by several layers of steel plates. This was on par with many doors at modern military strongholds. Since the iron doors weighed so much, the entrance had to be modified and slideways were installed on the ground to support the doors. Even with the slideways, they could not be pulled open by manpower alone. Due to this, one of the two steam engines in the yard was used to provide the driving force to move the doors. If the demonic beasts broke the defensive line set up by the tequila witches, as long as the relic of gods got retrieved, these two doors could block any following demonic beasts outside. Standing in front of the doors that were as big as a multi-layered building, Roland could feel their solidness. Almost 1/3 of Neverwinter's winter steel output was used to build these two doors. Their simple rectangular shape might seem easy to produce, but their size alone required a higher level of skill. On the day the doors were installed, Roland had witnessed the scene as they were opened and shut. Listening to the toneless roar of the steam engine, the harsh grating on the sliding tracks, and watching the slowly closing doors, Roland felt as if he was in charge of the entrance that protected them from doomsday. On each side of the two iron doors, there was half a line of words. Combined together, they meant the third border city. Roland and the crowd of people that followed him walked into the cave. The light suddenly dimmed. Phyllis took out the stone of lighting and walked in the front of the team. She began to lead everybody down the deep cave. "Your Majesty, I don't quite get why you call this place the third border city," Wendy said with bewilderment. "If the outside border area is the first border city, then where is the second border city?" "Because the third is the proper title," Roland replied. "Ah? Anyway, don't you think the number 3 goes quite well with a stronghold? Besides, it doesn't matter what name we give it. What matters is people can remember it," Roland said with his hands laid out. "Alright, as long as you like it," Wendy said, twitching her mouth. After they stopped talking, the only sounds in the cave were the echoing footsteps and water dripping. Due to the lack of spray mix, only the floor of the cave was paved with concrete. On the two sides of the floor was a ditch and a mine railway. If materials and food were needed, they would be transported by carts hauled by the other engine at the entrance. Roland had heard from Phyllis that the gods' punishment witches were once interested in measuring the power of the machine, and they found out that even 5 of them pulling a rope together could not stop the steam engine from dragging them forward. Since the walls and ceiling of the cave could not be covered with concrete, leaking became inevitable. Luckily, the temperature inside of the mountain would not get too low, so the water inside would not freeze. While devouring worms would leave a trail of mucus behind while crawling forward, when its mucus dried out, it would glue the dirt together as if smearing a layer of paste on the surface of the walls and ceiling. Because of this, there was no danger that the cave would collapse. After about a half an hour's walk, the cave got brighter. "We're almost there." Phyllis slowed down. "Your Majesty, do you need—" Roland knew what she wanted to say and interrupted her. "It's okay. Take me there now." The god's punishment witch turned back and looked meaningfully at Roland. "Okay, I understand." Upon exiting the narrow cave, they entered a large cavern. In front of them was a spacious dome building that was the size of a football field. Throughout the cavern, tens of light beams were projected onto the dome and cast bright spots on the floor. With the help of this light, people would not feel oppressed in this area even though they were deep under the mountains. Besides the witches, the First Army was also dispatched to guard this place. Each of the soldiers had been examined by Nightingale personally to make sure they were Roland's strongest supporters. The deeper into the dome they went in, the more they got away from this light. In the center of the spacious dome, there was only a few rhombus-shaped magic cores. They were the 3 Tequila senior witches, or in other words, original carriers. Roland walked to the 3 of them with a smile on his face. He stuck out his right hand toward the leading blob monster. "Finally we could meet." You must be Pasha, aren't you? At that moment, Roland could feel someone panting behind him and felt that a hand was on his shoulder. Undoubtedly, if anything went wrong, Nightingale would drag him into the mist instantly. The blob being fell silent for a while, then a familiar voice sounded, "I'm surprised, Your Majesty. Before today, we've only been communicating through the illusion core. Perhaps the illusionary images weren't that frightening, but at this moment, in front of me, the calmness you're showing is astonishing. To be honest, you're the first one who's seen this shell and reacted as if nothing had happened. Even when the tequila witches first saw this form, they weren't as calm as you are. I'm curious, aren't you afraid at all?" She paused, reached out a tentacle, and gently tangled it with Roland's hand. "But you're right. I'm Pasha. Thanks for supporting the tequila witches." "He hasn't supported us. It's hard to say whether the group of common people he sent are meant to help or supervise us." A cold consciousness came in. It won't be too late to tell him after he finishes exploring the big snow mountain. "Aletheia. We made an agreement," a third voice interrupted. "All right. I'll shut up." It seemed the other two were Aletheia and Celine, who often appeared beside Pasha. Roland did not mind their tones. Firstly, those ancient witches had lived in an era where witches were superior, and so it would be difficult for them to change their mindset. Secondly, compared to having their attitudes changed, he wished more to make some substantial gains. The fjord's most famous explorer once said that fear comes from unknown. "No matter how you look, your souls belong to tequila witches," Roland said, smiling, "and I'm no stranger to the latter. Agatha has become an essential member of the Witch Union and a beloved and trusted member at that." Roland noticed that Pasha's tentacle was rather coarse and the surface of it was not as dry as it looked. The surface of her tentacle felt moist. Perhaps it was because she constantly crawled in the dirt. Roland could clearly feel the warmth beneath her skin. This giant blob in front of him was, undoubtedly, a fresh life form. "I see," Pasha's voice sounded sentimental, "and you're right. Our cooperation had begun long ago. Faced with the threats of the demons, everybody should let go of past prejudices and try hard to join hands." After some short casual conversation, Roland came to the main subject. "The relics of gods have arrived, right? Can I have a look at the things that determine mankind's lives?" Pasha waved the main tentacles on top of her head. "Of course. Come with me." Chapter 774, Divine Land. Roland curiously observed the tequila senior witches as they moved. Their tentacles played different roles. The short ones twisted like snakes so they could stand and walk, while the long ones constantly inserted themselves into the mud to correct directions. Some tentacles were amazingly long. Based on the height of dome's ceiling, the tentacles were over 100 meters long and could shrink freely like arms. Even the strongest muscles could not support such long tentacles. Roland guessed that the magic power in the blob enabled them to walk freely, just like the giant demonic beasts that apparently broke the limits of gravity. After walking a couple dozen steps and passing 2 magic cores, Pasha stopped in front of a cube which seemed to be made of gemstone. "That's a god's stone of retaliation." "I can't get too close," Nightingale whispered in his ear to remind him. Roland nodded silently and asked Pasha, "Is the relic in it?" "Yes. While keeping it locked up, we can limit its summoning range. If we did not put it in a box made of God's stone of retaliation, I'm afraid the residents in your city would be unconsciously affected by the relic." Pasha stretched out a few tentacles and placed them on the box without immediately opening it. "Before you have contact with it, I have to clarify some points lest you have an accident." "Is it dangerous?" Wendy stepped forward and subconsciously stood in front of Roland. "Don't be too worried. As long as you don't stay alone with the relic, it'll be all right," Celine interrupted. "What do you mean by that?" Roland asked, raising his eyebrows. Pasha became more serious and said, "As I have said before, if you open yourself up in front of the relic, you can see some incredible sights. Either a witch or a common person can be summoned. But remember, what you see isn't completely fictional. It's different from the phantom instrument. What you see in the painting scrolls will have an impact on reality." That's the first thing I want to clarify. Don't accept the summoning of deities alone at any time. Roland immediately felt a chill creep up his spine, thinking, the sight in the painting can affect reality? Isn't that the same as Sadako Yamamura climbing out from television? Why is it not dangerous when there are more people? Pasha explained, because once you're trapped in the divine land, you'll have some obvious reactions, for example, glazed eyes, dull body, ravings, etc. The people around you have to drag you out of the range of the relic. In the historical records, many people had once been summoned by the relic alone and then their souls could not return to their bodies. 2 or 3 people having contact with it that take turns effectively reduces the risk. Roland glanced at the tequila witches and said, I got it. In other words, since there are at least 5 people here, it's not that dangerous at all, right? Celine nodded. If this wasn't so, we wouldn't allow you to watch it at close range. Aletheia coldly said, there's another point we need to warn you about. You should know that the huge painting scrolls in the relic display the demon civilizations. If you have a chance to see them, they may. No, they'll definitely try to hurt you. We can help you wake up from the summoning, but we can't help you resist the horror of it. She paused for a moment and continued with a sneer in her tone, if you're too scared and make a scene at that time, don't blame me for not warning you. That's what you wanted to clarify? Roland remained undisturbed. Anything else you want to say? Aletheia probably did not expect him to be so indifferent and could not help feeling slightly stifled. If not, then open it. Roland sighed silently. As a modern man who enjoyed all kinds of monster, alien, thriller and horror movies, he had a much broader horizon than the ancient people. If he was unprepared, he might be scared. But what Aletheia said was, in some sense, sort of a spoiler. As long as it would not cause him real harm, he did not think that he would give up exploring the mystery of the deities. I see. Pasha shrunk her tentacles and opened the god stone box to reveal a spindle-shaped red crystal. It floated up from the box by itself and then it, like the magic cores, quietly floated in the air about a meter above the ground. It can't get out of the range of the god stone. You need to get close to it and relax, then you can enter the divine land. Your Majesty, said Wendy, grabbing Roland's hand with some concern. Don't worry. It won't be dangerous since you're here. I know what I'm going to face, he said, gently patting the red-haired witch's hand to comfort her. Other than the information given by the tequila witches, he also learned some information from Isabella's memory and his exploration of pivotal secret temple of the church in the dream world. They proved that something could indeed bring people into an incredible divine land. Roland sat down cross-legged beside the relic and closing his eyes. Meanwhile, Pasha stretched out her tentacles to connect with those of her companions. Their consciousness quickly connected together and reflected what they intended to say in each other's mind. A furious Aletheia said, how dare he be so arrogant? I can't wait to see him scare and tremble. Otherwise, he'll never truly realize what terrible enemies he'll face. When he wets himself, I wonder what he'll say. Celine glared at her angrily. What good will that do us? Any ordinary king is very concerned about dignity and prestige. If you make him disgrace himself, then I'm afraid he'll hate us. How can we explore the snow mountain and look for the chosen one if we lose his support? Even worse, what if he becomes terrified of the demons? The whole world will lose hope. He said he was not afraid of anything. Anyway, I warned him. Do you think you can stop him? Celine muttered, it was a mistake to bring him here to contact the relic. I didn't recommend doing so from the very beginning. At least we should have waited until we reach a basic level of trust. Pasha softly sighed. So should we just hide it from him or prevent him from approaching the relic then? We'll never get his trust that way. Put yourself in his shoes. Would you trust an ally who is unwilling to allow you to know about the key that determines the fate of human destiny? No matter how you explain, he won't appreciate it. Only after he experiences it in person will he understand our sincerity. But it's also unnecessary to be too worried. The demon and the giant don't show up every time. Besides, even if he's too scared and made a mistake, we can promise that we'll keep our lips buttoned and never reveal it to other people. I think he'll understand. Pasha said to reassure Celine and herself. What about the two witches coming with him? Will they keep that secret too? Asked Alethea with malicious intent. She, undoubtedly, regarded it as a pleasure to see a common person lose face in front of witches. That's not our business. When Roland opened his eyes again, he found himself in an infinitely spacious palace. Chapter 775, Hello, World. The sky dome, the bloody moon, the giant paintings. They were all just as Pasha described. All of them were extremely magnificent. No wonder they called it the Divine Land. Only when he was in here could he truly feel its vastness. Was this a broadcast or perhaps a way of controlling the subconscious mind? Roland squatted down to lightly stroke the floor. It seemed to be made of polished stones, but it was as smooth as a mirror. He could feel both its coldness and toughness through his fingers. It appeared what he saw was real rather than fictional. Due to having had similar experiences in the dream world before, which was already extremely real, he would not freak out over seeing this. Roland looked up at the dome. The huge bloody moon hanging above the giant painting was like a round pancake. With a careful observation, he could see the surging ripples on its surface. To be more exact, the moon was like a sea. It was not as bright and dazzling as the sun. Though it appeared to be scarlet, he could not feel its light or heat. The red ripples were waves or vortexes, densely covering the entire bloody moon. The only problem was that this circle was a bit too perfect. It looked like a flat circle rather than a sphere. Perhaps the bloody moon was too close to him? Roland stared at it for quite a while but failed to associate it with the red meteor observed by the astrologers. It was neither a planet nor a star. If the Battle of Divine Will was really caused by it, then how could it come to Earth? An idea suddenly popped into his mind. If Astrologer of Dispersion Star, the chief astrologer, came to be summoned by the relic, could he figure out whether this stuff among the flickering stars was indeed the bloody moon? Of course, he could not guarantee that the poor old man would not directly faint out of fear. Roland shrugged, stood up, and looked at the 4 giant paintings around the bloody moon. They showed a throne, a sea, a black screen, and himself. Besides the underground dome in the third border city, he had already read the records of these paintings in the library of Pivotal Secret Temple. They were not that strange. A relic was like a recorder which constantly reflected the world around it. According to the description of Pasha, the giant painting that became a totally black screen was the eliminated underground civilization. Roland greeted Wendy and himself in the painting, but they did not respond. They apparently could not hear him. Seeing this, he wondered why Pasha said that the Divine Land would have an impact on reality. He approached the painting of the throne and touched the painting scroll with his fingers. It felt like a soft and smooth cloth with a delicate texture. The image was just an image as he could not cross its border and walk into the painted world. Roland walked around but made no further discoveries. He planned to walk outside the palace to find out whether the land was boundless when he suddenly heard some noises from the painting scroll behind him. It was extremely loud in such a quiet place. It sounded like the rubbing of steel objects or the echo of a hard object hitting the ground. He immediately felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. What the hell? No one mentioned these giant paintings could also make a sound. He stopped and suddenly turned around. In the first painting, a dark-armored warrior had suddenly appeared, sitting on the throne. His scarlet eyes looking down at him. There was also some movement in one of the other paintings. With many bubbles surging upwards with a soft gurgling sound, a huge eyeball emerged from the dark sea. It got closer and closer to the edge of the painting as if it intended to escape from the frame. There were 3 pupils in a triangular shape that stared at him at the same time. It was making him really uncomfortable at first glance. Did you invite each other to come together? Roland could not help feeling relieved. As long as they did not hide and play tricks on him, he was not afraid of these 2 monsters. They were not at all frightening in appearance. They were just a senior demon and a guardian of the relic of an unknown civilization. He walked to the center of 4 giant paintings and looked up to stare at the 2 alien creatures. Good afternoon. Did you also come to participate in the battle of divine will? Must we fight to the finish? Can't we just sit down and talk about it? Can you understand me? Say something even if you can't. Hey, is this a winking game? If you wink, you'll lose? Roland tried to communicate with them some more but never received any response. He did not know whether it was an illusion, but he felt that the demon was breathing more and more rapidly and the huge eyeball gradually trembled. Was this the side effect of staring at each other? Were they just able to stare at him until their eyes felt sore? How could it be described as dangerous? It was not a problem for him to visit here alone. He rolled his eyes and intended to end this boring staring contest by turning around, but noticed out of the corner of his eye that a group of black tentacles had suddenly appeared in the painting scrolls. They stretched toward the demon and the eyeball, moving like a snake and wrapped around them very tightly. What the hell? Roland was stunned. The demon finally moved. He tightly grasped the throne and screamed with a weird voice. Flames and transparent blades emerged around him to fight the tentacles, however, the tentacles outnumbered them. The soft and tiny hands at the end of tentacles could easily break the weapons summoned by the demon. The demon seemed to be fighting a very powerful, invisible enemy and his screams became even fiercer. Roland could feel the tension in his tone. As an electric light burst out from the armor, the tentacles finally shrank and loosened their control. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the demon, with some difficulty, pushed himself out of the throne and ran out of the range of the giant painting without hesitation. He had even broken a piece of the throne's armrest in panic. The giant eye was not doing any better as several tentacles had already pierced into the eyeball. Roland could even feel its pain when looking at it. Light blue liquid flew out from the holes like tears. Instead of screaming like the demon, the giant eye constantly gave off harsh lights from its 3 pupils to block most of the tentacles. Suddenly, all the pupils of the giant eye simultaneously opened and a looming ripple dashed toward the giant painting. Roland immediately felt an overpowering stench blowing towards him and he could not help but take a step backward. At the same time, the tentacles let go the eyeball and the eyeball quickly retreated back in the direction where it came and disappeared into the darkness in a blink. The rippling blue water turned darker and darker as the eyeball sank and it became completely black after a while. What happened? Roland glanced at the painting of the throne, which was a mess, and observed the painting of the sea which had turned dark again, not knowing how to respond for a long time. Chapter 776, Contrary to Common Sense. It has been nearly 10 minutes, it seems that he hasn't met anything, said Celine in relief. It's a pity that he has really good luck. Alethea responded much less excitedly. Celine complained, I don't want to count on chance. Please choose a safer method next time. Let's not talk about what has already happened. Let's guess how long the king can stay in there. Isn't the longest record for a common person less than 15 minutes even taking into account those who tried in the Land of Dawn, said Alethea, changing the topic. Witches do not fare any better. How long you can stay in the divine land has nothing to do with your magic power. Even in the Union, the relic was constantly monitored by a group of common people in turns. However, considering the king's age and experience, he should come out soon. According to all the records that Celine had read through, the warriors who had been to the battlefield and fought the demons generally persisted longer, whether a witch or a common person. The highest record was held by Lady Alice, who had stayed there for almost 2 hours. As a king who had never been to the battlefield, Roland had to be very skilled to last so long. Maybe he'll want to stay longer. After all, it's his first time to witness such a marvelous scene. Then he'll feel dizzy and even fall unconscious. Celine suddenly realized something and looked at Pasha. Did you forget to tell him that? A coma isn't too bad and won't cause him any real damage. Pasha shook her tentacles and said, on the contrary, when he runs out energy, this kind of unpleasant thing can reduce his interest in getting in contact with the relic again. It's better for everyone this way. So, you didn't forget to tell him? Pasha did not directly answer. Sometimes it's better to not explain. None of us would like to have so many restraints when we explore the divine land. I now understand why Lady Natalia chose you as one of the candidates for the 3 chiefs, said Alethea, smacking her lips. Celine agreed with Alethea. Compared to the disgrace of being scared, a coma due to energy exhaustion could be regarded as a result without side effects. It could reduce the curiosity of the common people while not destroying their relationship with them. Pasha obviously had more foresight than them. After a while, she began to frown slightly and asked, "It's been more than a quarter of an hour. Is he okay?" "It seems, nothing is wrong. This king seems to be full of surprises," Pasha replied after glancing at the sitting Roland Wimbledon. "It's a new record for common people." "Should I say congratulations?" said Alethea, shrugging her main tentacle. Celine gave no response. She felt a little uneasy, like something was wrong. The waiting that followed seemed to validate her guess. Another 15 minutes later, Roland still remained motionless and she was getting more and more anxious. Having lived for over 100 years, she should feel disconnected from time. However, the almost constant heart pulse of her shell could accurately tell her the change of every second. A 45 minutes exploration was too long for someone who was not a warrior or an extraordinary. He should have run out of energy by now. Celine wondered, was there some unobserved accident in the divine land? Wendy could not help step forward and try to wake up the king, but was immediately stopped by Pasha. "If you get too close to the relic, you'll be affected by it too. Then let me enter the divine land and bring His Majesty back," she insisted. "Even if you go there, you can't bring back your king. No matter how many people are simultaneously summoned by it, they'll see a different divine land." Celine noticed that the other witch that had been hidden had begun to move. From the vague magic reaction, Celine knew that she had taken something out of her pocket. Based on the information collected by Phyllis, it should be a unique weapon of Neverwinter. She passed her concerns along to the other 2 and then Pasha nodded and took immediate action. She stretched out her tentacles to wrap around the king and pulled him back to Wendy. Though it was not the ideal way to end the exploration, the safety of Roland was top priority. If both sides conflicted with each other, the consequences would be disastrous. As the relic was put back into the god's stone box, Roland suddenly opened his eyes. "Your Majesty. Are you okay?" Wendy asked eagerly, helping him to stand up. "There is nothing wrong. I'm fine," he answered, rubbing his sore legs. "I met alien monsters who were guarding the other 2 relics and talked to them. Unfortunately, they did not understand my words." Celine was shocked. "Wait, what are you talking about? Did you meet the demon and a huge eyeball?" "It seemed to stay in a boat that can move underwater, but I'm not sure if it's a boat or something else," Roland answered. Even though she could not see her companions' expressions, she could feel their shock through their shared connection, especially Alethea's. Among all the survivors, she had stayed in the divine land for the longest time. Her experience in Blessed Army enabled her to persist for about an hour, but only when nothing appeared in the painting scrolls. If she met the demon or an unknown enemy, the speed of energy consumption would be doubled. What happened then? Pasha continued to ask. "I'm not really sure. Anyway, some black tentacles suddenly popped up in the painting scrolls and attacked them. Those tentacles were so powerful that the monsters had to retreat from the paintings. It happened in only a few minutes." Did he mean that he had met the guardians of the other 2 civilizations at the same time and defeated them while not being injured at all? Celine felt as if she was listening to a fairy tale. She was not surprised by the presence of black tentacles. As the energy of the user declined, the relic would have a greater impact on them. He might hear imaginary sounds, see imagery scenes, tentacles, or something else one by one. They were not merely mental disturbances, but they could do real harm to the body. That was why Pasha emphasized that they were more than illusions. If they interrupted the summoning before any real harm was caused, the user would not have a serious problem. Of course, it was impossible for ordinary people to defend themselves against the spiritual erosion. Even a witch who had experienced thousands of battles would quickly feel tired and eventually lose control of her body. But what Roland faced was a completely reversed situation, and the black tentacles had rushed toward the enemy. She had never heard of such an instance. Looking at the king, who seemed not to care about what had happened, Celine suddenly had an incredible guess. Was this ordinary person comparable to Lady Alice, Queen of Starfall City and head of the Three Chairs, in terms of mental power? However, he did not seem to be aware of it. After stretching his arms and legs, he laughed and said, "Anyway, thank you for pulling me out. I intended to see if there was any border to the Divnland, but it was too large and I did not want to walk all the way back." The three witches remained speechless for a long while, and then Pasha finally broke the silence. "Ahem, that's all right. Do you still want to continue exploring the relic?" Roland shook his head and said, "Not right now. There are just 4 painting scrolls and it won't make much difference to have another look at them. Take me to the central carrier." Chapter 777, Question and Answer. Ever since the previous meeting with the Tequila Witches, Roland had looked forward to meeting with the central carrier. To decipher the literature left by the underground civilization, many tequila survivors had sacrificed themselves by merging their souls, but it could only answer yes or no questions. Otherwise, it was basically a useless object. Thinking of this solemn story, he felt that an air of mystery shrouded this central carrier. When Roland finally saw it, he gasped in shock. It was chained up in a secret chamber under the hall. This blob, much bigger than any original carrier such as the one occupied by Pasha, was heavily chained. Its thickest tentacles were forced apart and nailed to the walls or the ceiling. From its badly scarred skin and its broken tentacles, he could tell that it was not the first time she was treated this way. He remembered that it was able to feel things just like the original carriers. It was able to feel the heat and cold, taste the sweet and bitter, and feel pain. He could not help knitting his eyebrows, asking, "Why?" "I remember the volunteers integrating with the central carrier were all witches, even including one of your 3 chiefs, Lady Eleanor, Your Majesty," Pasha sighed. "We had no choice. Carriers are as powerful as God's punishment warriors. Their tentacles can drill into the earth and build a light well in the dome. They can also attack enemies and tear a prey in half. If we don't keep her here, she'll subconsciously move around and cause us lots of trouble. If that happens, she'll be even harder to deal with than those hybrid demonic beasts." Roland quickly understood Pasha's feelings of powerlessness. He guessed that this tentacle blob might be a combat unit created by the underground civilization, but if it lost its mind and got out of control, it would be a serious threat to the relic of gods and the magic core. He believed that the tequila survivors did not want to take this risk, and as a result, they had no choice but to keep it trapped here. However, knowing the reason did not make him feel any better. He felt sad for the witches who had willingly sacrificed everything for tequila only to end up imprisoned in this dark corner. Seeing Roland contemplate these emotions, Pasha said with a mixed expression of gratitude and sadness, "We tried to ask about their feelings, but we were unable to get a response. The souls merged with the central carrier cannot be separated again by the magic core, so we have no idea whether they're able to feel what's going on." Alethea, who remained quiet, suddenly spoke again. "All the tequila witches, including us, have determined to follow Lady Eleanor forever. You don't have to feel too bad for them. They knew what they were going into." Roland somehow felt that her voice wasn't as cold as before. "Well, if it had been as cold as dry ice, it's now only cool as iced water." Celine added, "When we asked the central carrier whether we should chain her, all her 3 main tentacles answered yes. If she hadn't agreed to this, we would not have tied her up so tightly." Roland nodded and said, "Maybe the Witch Union can help you with this problem. Soraya can produce flexible fabrics to replace the iron chains, and a little girl named Soft Feathers can stick things together. If they work together, they may find some way to constrain her without hurting her. If you don't mind." Pasha slightly lowered the main tentacle on her head and said, "That will be great. You have my gratitude. Don't worry about it." Roland replied, then asked, "What did you mean by all 3 main tentacles answered yes?" She can say yes with one main tentacle and no with another at the same time? When that happens, how can you make sure of what she's trying to say? Let Celine explain that to you. Hearing that there may be a way to alleviate the pain of the witches in the central carrier, Celine seemed quite excited and answered, "The central carrier is different from us. It has 3 main tentacles, which enables her to express more complicated information without communicating through telepathy, which is what I'm doing right now." With these words, Celine's main tentacle on her head emitted a beam of dim red light. Oh? It can even shine? Yes, before we learned how to communicate through thoughts, we often used this method to express our feelings and emotions. But now we don't use it as much anymore. She moved to the center of the secret chamber, pointing at the 3 main tentacles which were hanging from the central carrier's head and were nailed to the ground. Without consciousness, she can't express her feelings. She's only able to reply yes or no through the red light. If a main tentacle shines, it means yes. If it doesn't, it means no. She continued to explain, however, when we were deciphering the literature of the underground civilization, we realized that a simple yes or no couldn't quickly help us find the correct answers. For example, if we mistake the sentence "I'm a tequila witch" for "I'm a witch" or "I'm tequila," she'll answer no. With this method, we would have to spend a lot of time on confirming each simple sentence. Roland immediately understood what she meant. "So you counted her shining main tentacles to see how close you got to the right answer?" Celine exclaimed, "You really are smart." That's right. When we read her something closer to the right answer, she would show us more red lights. When all 3 of her main tentacles shone, it meant that the answer was either 100% correct or she couldn't agree more. Roland felt touched yet again by these witches, thinking, so that was how this fusion of all the witches' souls including Eleanor's confirmed that they should be constrained underground? Even though it was unclear whether these souls made this decision for the sake of safety or based on their own feelings, this choice was still quite moving. He took a deep breath, asking, "May I ask her some questions?" Celine moved to the side and answered, "Yes, of course. You can just ask her directly." Roland approached the central carrier and asked slowly, "Suppose now I've 2 baskets. Each basket has 2 apples inside. After I dump out all the baskets, there are 4 apples on the ground. Is it right?" All the 3 tentacles shone at once. Celine was startled. Is that what you wanted to ask?" Wendy also felt a little embarrassed at this moment, asking, "Your Majesty, what are you up to now?" "It's just a test." Roland remained calm and continued to ask the second question. "Now suppose that I've got 12,345 baskets, and each basket has 54,321 apples. If I dump out all the baskets, how many apples are there on the ground?" He took out a paper strip and continued, "I guess there are this many apples. Am I right?" He read out the correct answer he had prepared in advance, which was a 9-digit number. The calculation required to get this number should be considered quite complex at this age. He believed that people who had never gone through Neverwinter's mathematics education could never get the right answer in a short amount of time. This can be seen from the shared silence amongst the Tequila Senior witches. However, all the 3 main tentacles of the central carrier shone red without delay after hearing what he said. Just as they did to the first question. Chapter 778, Commandeering a Meeting. Amazed by the result, Roland was lost in thoughts. This central carrier can figure out a 9-digit multiplication. No matter the method she used, whether it be using summation or column multiplication, she managed to find the correct answer instantly. This must mean that her calculating skills far surpass those of the common people. Even if she's only able to answer yes or no, she'll still be of great assistance to the Arithmetic Academy. At the very least, she can check the calculation results of the Academy members, which can help minimize the mistakes of large and complex calculation projects. He squatted down excitedly and with a childlike grin, patted a main tentacle of the central carrier. "You're brilliant." The red light went out. Pasha reminded him, "Your Majesty, she can't communicate with you directly. She can understand my words and even give me yes or no answers. This already counts as a kind of communication." Roland believed that communication, in essence, is just the receiving and sending of information. The central carrier can at worst be described as having troubles expressing her thoughts and thus couldn't communicate as a normal person could. He was not discouraged by this in the slightest and intended to continue finding out whether the central carrier was really limited to just giving out yes or no responses. After pondering for a while, he said, "Now let's suppose lighting one main tentacle means 1 and lighting 2 tentacles means 2. Can you give me a 3 with your red light?" The question seemed to be much simpler than the 5-digit multiplication, but it served an entirely different purpose. If the central carrier could display a correct answer to this question, it would mean that she was able to give more elaborate feedback to questions. Moreover, she might also be able to display calculation results directly in some way. However, the central carrier did not instantly answer like before. After a few seconds, one of her tentacles started to glow, another one only glimmered, while the last one remained dark. According to Celine, the central carrier meant that what Roland said was 30% correct. However, this signal did not last for long. The light of the glimmering tentacle went out very quickly and was soon followed by the glowing one. "So the answer is a no?" he wondered. "This is..." Celine slightly sighed and explained, "This is beyond her capacity." She had to express her agreement in a more complicated way to your question and thus got confused. She paused before continuing, "We've tried to ask her to express simple ideas and even some short sentences. However, once she found out that she could not answer a question simply with a yes or no, she would respond much slower and also easily get confused like how she just did." Roland said, frowning, "Does this mean I have caused some sort of a logical barrier in her brain? Is she all right?" Celine waved her tentacles, answering, "She'll be all right after a moment of rest. I once tried asking her some contradictory questions. As a result, she ignored the rest of our questions for several weeks." Now Roland was certain that this biocomputer was going to be difficult to handle, but he still did not want to give up his plan of creating a new communication system to help the central carrier express more complicated ideas by answering yes or no. As she could check the calculation result, he thought that she must have known the correct answer and just did not know how to display it with her tentacles. However, formulating this system was well beyond his area of expertise. As engineers and programmers tend to not get along very well, he knew very little about computer programming. After a bit of thought, he decided to give up on the idea of studying this central carrier all by himself. "By the way, I remember that you said the carriers needed mud and heat to continue functioning. Is there any magma here?" Pasha replied, "Fran hasn't drilled that deep yet, but we found a boiling underground river here. So we should be able to find lava flow nearby soon. Also, I often smell sulfur from this underground river. It's good for us to take a bath in it, too. As for the central carrier, we pump water from the river to shower her every few days, so you don't need to worry about this." Hearing that magma was not a must for the carrier and that hot water could be used as a replacement, Roland was excited to think that he would only need a boiler to heat some water for this central carrier if he wanted to move her to the Arithmetic Academy one day. He knew it was still not the time to make this request, as it would feel like he was overstepping his boundaries with the tequila witches who had just moved here and had not yet joined the united front with Neverwinter. Besides, he was worried that those astrologers from the academy wouldn't be able to keep their composure once they saw this gigantic tentacle monster. He would first have to build trust with the witches during the exploration of the Snow Mountain before he could make this sensitive request. After Roland left the secret chamber and ended his tour of the third border city, he began to contemplate about the plans for this place. At present, only a rough frame of this underground city had been constructed, and it could only serve as a temporary underground residence for the witches for now. Only after tunnels connected the numerous peaks of the impassable mountain range could they consider this a real hidden stronghold. With the artillery installments and military fortifications above ground, it would then be incorporated into part of Neverwinter's outermost defense line. As soon as he returned to the castle, he summoned all the department leaders of City Hall to his reception hall. A purple curtain of light slowly materialized in front of them before eventually enveloping the whole room. Despite the fact that Roland informed them in advance about what they were going to see, the officials' faces still drastically changed when they saw this incredible scene. The young Minister of Agriculture, Sirius Daly, even accidentally knocked over his teacup on the table in shock. Berev kept on wiping the sweat from his forehead. Kalsichi and Astrologer of Dispersion Star stared at the light curtain in fearful disbelief. If it had not been for the king who was still sitting calmly in his chair, they probably would have already run away with their tails between their legs. Roland glanced around and found that the only person who remained relatively calm was the noble lady from the northern region, Edith, who only jumped a little from the scene, but at the same time her eyes seemed to be filled with excitement and curiosity. He also noticed that she was now looking at him with more respect in her eyes. He had to admit that trying to figure out women was quite the difficult task. Aside from Edith, all the other City Hall officials' reactions were within his expectations. As he was determined to form a united front with the tequila survivors to fight against the demons, he knew that he could not hide them from the officials forever. Given this, he thought he had better introduce the witches to the officials before anyone in the City Hall noticed something strange in the mountains to the north of Neverwinter. He also believed that 2 years of working in the City Hall should have broadened their outlooks and made them more open-minded toward new things. However, after he explained to them who these tentacle blobs were, why they came here, and how he planned to explore the snow mountain together with them, most officials did not seem to be much supportive at all. If they had not been familiar with the witches in the Witch Union, they would have already treated those ancient witches as alien creatures like the demons. Berev, the City Hall director, said that it was too late to come up with new budget plans for this exploration since it was already the time for the finance department to work on the final accounts of the year. He also expressed his worries about border areas' possible vulnerability if they were to dispatch additional troops for this expedition, given how a force was recently just sent to the southernmost region. With an obvious distrust in the tequila survivors, Chief Knight Carter doubted the safety of this joint action and even argued that dangers might arise due to internal conflicts of the expedition team. Sirius, Minister of Agriculture, stuttered about how the grains in stock could hardly support this plan alongside the ongoing military expedition, and this news about the shortage of food might cause panic among the residents of the city. Carl, the Minister of Construction, expressed his concerns about the instability of the mining area above the place hollowed out by the ancient witches in the mountain range. Hearing them giving various reasons for canceling this exploration, Roland was clear that all they were doing was persuading him to think twice before cooperating with those tentacle monsters. The discussion had become bogged down over this contentious issue. If this had happened in a place such as a democratic parliament, he would not have been able to carry out his plan. However, he did not forget that he was the Lord of Neverwinter, the King of Grey Castle, and the one who had the final say in this matter. He knew that it was now time for him to take over the meeting and forcibly carry out the plan. Just like he did when he decided to protect the witches in his domain. Chapter 779, The King's Decision. Roland knocked on the table and everybody in the hall instantly quieted down. He rose from this chair and paced over to stand behind the officials. When the months of demons end, we'll welcome the new year as the most important year for Grey Castle. I'll unify the entire kingdom and hold the coronation ceremony to officially become the king, and you'll all become my ministers to help me govern this country. 2 years ago, everyone would have considered Roland's promises to be the crazy ravings of an arrogant prince. 1 year ago, they would have thought that his plans were long-term goals. However, today, no one doubted what he said. All officials rose and placed their right hands on their chest almost simultaneously. They lowered their heads and said, "Your Majesty, it's our honor." Suddenly, all their complaints and doubts disappeared. They looked excited as they understood the power of Neverwinter after working these 2 years in City Hall. They knew, for sure, that once His Majesty made up his mind to unify the whole kingdom, he would definitely bring all the regions and areas of the kingdom into his control. When that happened, they would rise from the officials of a city to the most powerful ministers of a kingdom. Roland made a gesture, indicating them to sit down, and said, "It's more than that. My Grey Castle will become unprecedentedly large. My kingdom will include the Hermes Plateau in the north, reach the Endless Cape in the south, expand westward to the Barbarian Land, and eastward to the Fjord Islands. He further explained, to make that happen, the First Army will become the busiest department and thus leave fewer soldiers to guard Neverwinter. Given this, I've got to explore the Snow Mountain now to eliminate hidden threats to the city. I don't want my king city to be attacked by some unknown enemies from the mountains when the main force of the First Army isn't here. Carter suggested to the king in a low voice, Your Majesty, maybe the First Army and the Witch Union will be enough to explore the Snow Mountain. Roland interrupted, No, in a dark underground cave where the landscape is extremely complex, guns and cannons have only a limited effect. We don't have any maps of the cave or any preset firing position there. If they happen to meet some demonic hybrids, how much do you think it will cost the First Army to defeat them? The chief knight fell into silence at once. This is why we must work together with the tequila survivors. Their God's Punishment witches and the Witch Union have complementary advantages in this exploration. The First Army will set sentry posts along the way and cover their retreat if need be. This is the most prudent arrangement. Roland paused and then suddenly raised his voice. You all listen to me carefully. Don't tell me it's difficult to implement this plan. You're sitting here to solve problems for me. If you can't, my city hall doesn't need you anymore. He paused and looked at the city hall director. Bear of Mons? Bear shuddered, answering, Yes, Your Majesty. Is there any problem with the final accounts and logistics for the exploration? No. I believe. The old man wiped the sweat from his face. I'll give you a plan 5 days later. 3 days, Roland corrected him with an air of authority. After that, he turned to look at Minister of Agriculture. Sirius Daily? Yes, Your Majesty. If border areas' food stocks are low, you can get some from the Longsong area. We've got enough concrete boats for this. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Majesty. Carl van Bate. The Minister of Construction answered immediately, Your Majesty, I'll carefully check the geological condition of both the mining and furnace areas. Good, Roland smiled. Then the next one. This time, all the problems could be readily solved since all the officials saw the king's determination and accepted the tasks without any hesitation. After assigning the tasks to the officials, it was time to decide who would go for the exploration. Pasha's voice resounded in everyone's head again. Most of the officials got scared again, but as soon as they saw Roland calmly talking to the tentacle monster, they calmed down a little and did not flee the hall in panic. Since they had already promised His Majesty to work with the tequila witches, they thought that all they needed to do at this moment was force themselves to remain seated and listen to the voice. To avoid seeing the tentacle monster, they all closed their eyes and lowered their heads, pretending that they were engrossed in their thoughts. They acted as if the sound was some evil spell from the hell instead of a female voice. Seeing them, Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry. Edith was the only official who dared to look at the light curtain. Sometimes, she even tried to talk with the senior witches of tequila like Roland did. Not wanting to be upstaged by his opponent, Berev managed to lift up his head several times but failed to say anything in the end. Roland had expected this and had planned to not get the city hall officials heavily involved in the conversation. At last, the tequila witches agreed to send 50 God's Punishment witches to team with the Witch Union, and these witches were the main force for the exploration. The First Army would send a group of 500 soldiers with Brian as their commander to join this exploration as well. The remaining troops in the city would be temporarily handed over to Carter and continue to fight against the demonic beasts at the border. When both parties agreed on these arrangements and Roland was about to end this meeting, Edith suddenly raised her hand. Your Majesty, I wish to apply to join the Snow Mountain exploration team and go to the western region Snow Mountains together with the First Army soldiers. Berev's mouth corner twisted, saying, Come on, you're not a witch or a soldier. Don't mess up His Majesty's plan. She insisted, I used to serve as a fencing coach in a knight battalion and defeated each of my opponents including demonic beasts within 5 rounds. I can protect myself. Roland asked curiously, What's the reason for this request? Edith explained, The Battle of Divine Will is getting closer to us. but none of the officials sitting here know what the demons or the underground creatures look like. As we know nothing about our opponents in the upcoming war, I'm afraid that the City Hall won't be able to reach Your Majesty's expectations. I know that someone may think that since the First Army will fight against the demons, his own department won't get involved into the war-related stuff. However, once the battle begins, all the departments such as the Ministry of Construction and the Ministry of Agriculture will have to satisfy the needs of the war effort. This is inevitable, and so to do a great job in City Hall, we also have to know our enemies well. The City Hall director wanted to retort but did not know what to say at this moment. Roland could not help smiling, thinking that what she said might sound a little belligerent but was quite interesting. He also derived an inspiration from her statement and thought it might make a great new rule that only allowed promotion of the officials who had worked in the cities located on or near the front line during the battle. In this way, he could guarantee that the officials of the City Hall would never underestimate the importance of this fatal war or make some unrealistic government decrees during wartime. Besides, he believed that it would be alright to let Edith join the First Army's action as she indeed had battle experience. He nodded to the Pearl of the Northern region. Well, please go get ready for the exploration. Yes, Your Majesty. Edith smoothed back her hair that was hanging beside her ears and bowed with a smile. Chapter 780, Edith's Little Game. Sister, are you going to someplace far away? Colcont's voice could be heard from behind Edith. She continued sorting out her clothes without turning her head back to her brother. Not very far away. I'll just hang around somewhere in the western region. He came to her side and asked again, how long will it take? I don't know. Cole started to look at the clothes piled on his sister's bed. You didn't pick any formal dress, girdle, or your favorite corset. Aren't you going to visit some nobles or attend banquets? Edith gave him a quick glance. You've got stronger observation power now, but you don't always have to tell the others everything you notice. The boy winced at once and said, You were the one who taught me how to improve my observation ability. Now I'll teach you another thing. When you're talking to a woman, remember to remain graceful all the time and choose your words carefully, understand? But you're my sister. If I wasn't, you would suffer a lot. Cole shuddered and said, I see. Good. Edith shrugged. How do you feel working in City Hall? It's all right. Just like you instructed, I've never revealed my identity as a noble. All I do there is just writing and recording, which are easy for me. But I really don't understand, he hesitated. Why didn't you put me in your department? Since Colcont had watched the artillery drill, he had given up the idea of returning to the city of Evernight. He and Edith had also moved from the Foreign Affairs building to a spacious house near the Lord's castle. Now they were official residents of Neverwinter. As a noble who had received a traditional education, Cole had found a job easily in City Hall. Including the 100 or so scholars and servants from the northern region, Edith managed to gain a certain status there. These people would not stay here forever, but she knew that His Majesty would never reject more people from the northern region coming to learn the new system. The young king was thirsty for talents, and now the northern region was the only one that was willingly providing him with talented people. As long as her father kept on sending new people here, she would always keep her status in the new system of the king. Edith smiled and answered Cole, because it's not necessary and it may cause us troubles. The City Hall director always keeps an eye on me. If I put you in my department and he manages to find out your mistakes, I'll be faced with a dilemma. If we ruin the Comte family's reputation, it'll influence His Majesty's opinion of me. She paused for a moment and continued. Even if we don't get along with each other, the others will still think of us as a whole as we share a common surname. So no matter what you do in the future, you've got to remember you represent the whole family, not just yourself. The boy looked down with a contemplative expression on his face. Edith did not know how much he could understand, but she had said all there was to be said about this matter. Even when the feudal aristocratic order was totally replaced by Roland's new system, their family reputation would still have a long-term influence on them and might even draw more attention to them in the short run. Their common surname had replaced their noble identities to become the most important thing for them now, just like the way the moon became the brightest thing in the sky after the sunset. After quite a long while, he nodded and said, "I'll be careful." Their father had said that Cole was timid, irresolute and weak, therefore not a suitable heir for the Comte family. He was worried that this son would not be strong enough to lead his knights to guard the domain as a lord, and if it was wartime, his style would easily put him in an invidious position. Edith knew another point that the Duke had never mentioned. Cole Comte took after his father in personality. If Timothy had never planned to ally with some less powerful noble in the northern region to break the existing order there, the Comte family would not have been able to get where they were today. Now that they were no longer a lesser noble family in some remote place of the northern region, their father thought a more capable child, Edith, was a better successor and thus had great expectations of her. However, Edith was clear that Cole's shortcomings were not going to hold him back in Neverwinter. On the contrary, being prudent, introverted and a fast learner meant that he would adapt well to the job in City Hall. The moment she had known that a group of common people with snow powder weapons in hands had captured Timothy's city in merely one day, she had realized that personal strength and courage were not that important as before. This was also why she had insisted on keeping her brother in Neverwinter to learn new things. Cole casually picked up a long dress and lifted it in front of him, acting as if he were checking whether it fitted him or not. He asked, "Oh, sister. Where are you going indeed? I don't want to stay in such a large house alone. I'll get bored." "But it was you who asked me to buy a big house. It's 500 gold royals, which is quite expensive even for me. Now you think it's too big?" Edith asked him in a cold voice. The boy was startled and almost dropped the dress on the ground. No. I'm very satisfied with this house. Wait until next summer. Our little brother will come here to keep you company." She glanced at him and found that the dress seemed to suit him well. "As for where I'm going, it's a secret of Neverwinter, but it's not something I can't tell you. According to the old rules, you have to pay a price for this." Cole hesitated, as he was familiar with this little game and had been tricked into doing many silly things this way. However, in the end, his uncontrollable curiosity still took over his fear. He said to Edith, "I want to know." She smiled and said, "I'll go to the Great Snow Mountain of the western region with some soldiers from the First Army." He was surprised and asked, "You mean the source of the Redwater River? Is there anything special? Some unknown demonic hybrid monsters or alien species? We'll probably meet anything there," Edith said and then continued to describe the tequila witches she had seen during the meeting. "Now we've entered into an alliance with those tentacle monsters. I can't wait to witness our monster allies fighting against the monster enemies." Cole listened with his mouth agape and then stuttered, Wait. Aren't you afraid of those things? And His Majesty made a deal with some monsters? Even the demons don't look that scary, do they? So?" She threw up her hands and said. Not seeming to care much about her brother's worries, she continued to ask, "Isn't it a good thing for us?" He could not believe what he had heard and asked, "A good thing? Sister, are you crazy?" "What?" "No, I mean." Edith sighed and explained, "Do you remember what we want to achieve by serving the king here?" Cole replied with great care, "To achieve greater power?" She looked at him with shining eyes and said, "Not exactly, but at least it's not wrong. Greater power comes from a bigger domain and a larger population. If the ancient witches, some alien species and even the demons all rush to the king's side, the power of this kingdom will extend from the human world to some alien lands. Do you understand?" He gasped at what she had said. She continued and said, "A lesser noble who owns just a village can easily remember the names of all his subjects, but a lord of a city can never do that. The diversity of the people in a domain indicates how vast the domain is, and I remember no king had ruled over any alien species in the history. This is the new opportunity our family wants to seek. We left the remote and backward domain for this, so why are you worried about it?" Hearing this, Cole stood at the place for quite a long while before he could open his mouth and said, "But..." Edith interrupted. "But they're not our kind. That's what you want to say, right? She twitched her mouth and continued. As long as His Majesty is still at the helm, he will be able to do whatever he wants with those alien creatures. Her words made him sense a chill in this warm room. Now, it's time for you to pay back. With her eyes squinted, Pearl of the Northern Region pointed at the long dress and said with an affected drawl. Put it on and let me have a look.